Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Stratosphere Lounge. I'm your host, Bill Whittle, and it is the 2nd of July. Been gone for a couple weeks, but I'm back. So we're going to do the Super 10 Fit and Rested Extended Edition really big show. Try to catch up for having missed a couple weeks, but I have been busy with a lot of things. So, hi, everybody. Good to see everyone. Got a lot of, I'm sure there's a lot of political stuff and news stuff. We haven't talked for a couple weeks, but nevertheless, I am, I'm going to be doing a lot of stuff tonight. Got a lot to talk about, and I've got some stuff that I could use some feedback on. So we're going to talk some science fiction and media and that kind of thing for an hour and a half or so, and then we'll flip over and we'll do the political stuff after that. Before I do, however, I'm going to be dragging pictures into frame. I tried setting it up before where they're all already formatted, and to be honest with you, it's just hitting the thing as wrong as many times as possible. Got a bunch of really cool images and animations and stuff to look at, but before I do, let's grab this one and just say congratulations to Julius and Valerie on their wedding. And I asked Julius for if he had any video. I was hoping to watch it live. I wasn't able to get there. I wanted to very much. The Rodney King, the George Floyd unrest was still going on here, and to be perfectly honest with you, I don't know how close actual violence got, but there were boarded up buildings and boarded up offices about a half a mile from our house, and she just really didn't feel like it was a good idea to go, and once she pointed it out to me, I really agreed with her. But in any event, I was really, really happy to see the pictures, and I promised him that we would make the trip, and we will. We'll go down and see him. And there's a bunch of people out there in the Georgia area and Atlanta area I want to see as well. And so anyway, I talked to Julius about it, and basically he said that he is putting together like a video or something, and I'm looking forward to having him send me that so that we can run that as well. But just absolute congratulations to both of you. You look absolutely lovely. It's a beautiful day out there in Georgia, and very, very glad to see this. Very flattered about the whole thing, and dreadfully sorry, genuinely dreadfully sorry that we couldn't get there. We were. I think we were going to buy tickets on the 20th of March, and the 19th is when we got the big news on the whole lockdown thing. So we were ready to go on the first one, and we just, nobody saw this George Floyd thing coming. But in any event, congratulations sincerely, and best not only from me, but from everybody in the comment section, and also about, and for many people watching on YouTube as well. So there's that. Now on to the big stuff. There's so much to talk about, but I'm having a hard time. My brain still hurts. So I'll just sort of lay some of the stuff out that's happened in the last several weeks. As far as Cloud Imperium Games go, the people that make Star Citizen, there's been a lot of speculation about what's going on there, and I don't really know because I'm not on the inside. But what I do know is that ever since we went to the convention a year and a half ago, the updates that they'd been promising, they would just keep knocking major stuff off of them. And every week or two that would go by, they would knock more of these features that were apparently just around the corner off the roadmap. And the roadmap releases got thinner and thinner and thinner. And what I found was they would take something major out, like, and there's a reason why I'm going through all this, by the way. They take some major part of the game mechanics out, like docking or salvage. They take it out, and then and they would replace it with things like prison play or harvesting vegetables and stuff. This began well over a year ago, and when I first started seeing this, I thought, so a major game mechanic that's, forget the technical stuff, the hard stuff like server meshing that allows everybody to talk to each other. So they're taking out stuff like that are really important aspects to the game are disappearing from the roadmap, and in exchange we're getting stuff that, oh, here's prison gameplay. Well, the first of all, it's just a level. It's just an environment. There's no new tech needed there, and there's nothing particularly extraordinary about it. And nobody particularly wanted it. You could say, well, it was slowing down the griefers and so on. But look, here's where I'm going with this. A couple months ago, they had for the last year and a half on Star Citizen, we've been told that there was very little progress on Star Citizen because everybody was working on Squadron 42, which is the single-player version of the game. And again, I've got a purpose for all this. I'm not just trashing them. And so I thought that was kind of unfair, but nevertheless, there it is. 6 weeks ago, they announced that they were going to have a Squadron 42 update, some playability and some stuff. And that video came and went. The date for it was never released. It's 5 weeks old now, something like that. I got an email from them just as a subscriber saying, "Hey, new update," and it was a link to a kind of a fairly weak highlight film that they did back at the end of 2019. But even more importantly than this is that the people who were on the game in October of 18, when we all went there, are gone. They're just not visible. Chris Roberts, who's micromanaged this whole company, hasn't been seen since the end of 2019. All of the developers that used to be there, you just don't see anymore. They used to do 4 or 5 shows, a week, and now they don't do any of that stuff. They are in. It's got for 6 months now at least. I've had a real bad feeling about it. Now look, they just finished having their biggest fundraising week ever. Apparently, they made $12 million in a week. And so I don't think the thing is in any danger of just shutting down. But I do think what's happening is that they have become absolutely hobbled by their choice of game engine. First of all, they decided to go with CryEngine, and then CryEngine got sold to Amazon for Lumberyard. And then Amazon basically said, it's trash. We're not going to support it anymore. So then they're playing around with it. But from what I've heard, they have put Band-Aids on top of Band-Aids on top of Band-Aids on top of Band-Aids, and there's just no more Band-Aid room. And so the big stuff is just not happening. It's just not happening. And needless to say, I've put an awful lot of time and a significant amount of money into that game, and I, without question, feel like I've gotten my money's worth. I felt like I got my money's worth first time I sat there and watched the sun come up on one of those moons. But again, there's a point to all this. I just get this whole Star Citizen thing out of the way first and get it off my chest. So I don't know what's going on. I know they took a big investment from outside investors, and I suspect that what is happening is the outside investors are starting to put real pressure on Chris Roberts. But just to give you an example, in one of the last updates they did, they were proud to announce that they've created a, what do they call it, like a ship experience squad. This would be a bunch of developers who they've put on the task of improving what it feels like to be inside one of these spaceships. And they're doing this in March of 2020. In March of 2016, they said we're going to have the thing released in 2017 and so on, and we'll have 100 solar systems. By the way, some other people have pointed out that if they were to have this procedural solar system generator and they were to put a new we're still waiting for the second solar system, whether it's going to show up this year or not, I don't know, but I doubt it. But my point is that even if they were able to do what they were saying they could do, a procedural solar system generator, so they could put out an entirely new solar system every 2 weeks, let's say, which is crazy fast, every 2 weeks. But if they could do it every 2 weeks, it would take them 4 years to get to 100 solar systems, starting now. They passed the $300 million mark, and there are two things in here that I think are more important than even this stuff. First, and that has to do with 2 or 3 trailers from other games that have appeared. Trailers for Star Wars Squadron looked really good visually, looked really, really good. And look, Star Citizen has always been about the visuals, at least it is for me. There's not a whole lot of gameplay there, but it's just so visually stunning that it's just a fun place to hang out with your friends and go look around and walk around and do some little things. But the point is that it's visually a knockout, and it still is. But this Star Wars game looked better, I think, or it looked as good anyway. The Unreal 5 demo that we showed a couple of weeks ago is phenomenal. And from what I know about Chris Roberts, I think this is a forlorn hope. But some people have speculated that the reason that we haven't seen any of the Squadron 42 stuff is that they're all frantically trying to port it over to Unreal 5, which looks great. But, that would basically mean starting essentially from scratch. The artwork could stay. Their assets are not standardized. They'd have to basically readjust all of this stuff. If they moved to Unreal, they'd have many more developers, but they've claimed to have had 500 people working on this thing for 9 years now and $300 million. And the other thing that I mentioned, another new trailer that appeared, was a trailer for Cyberpunk 2020, which they've been working on for about 7 or 8 years, which looked good. But when you saw this gameplay demo, all of the NPCs were walking around and talking with you, and, interacting, and we're still at the stage where you go to one of these locations and NPCs are standing on the furniture. I don't see, since what was it, October, November of 2018, we were all very pumped. But since then, it's gotten worse and worse and worse and worse. And so everything I'm about to say coming up, in terms of what I want to be talking about, what I want to be doing, is basically predicated on the fact not so much that Star Citizen is going to fail. I don't know if it's going to fail or not, but I think I can say at this point with a fair amount of confidence that it is not going to be the society-wide phenomenon that I thought it was going to be, and that we all thought it was going to be back in 2017. 17, I think it was. Yeah, something like that. So now we get to the stuff that's important and the stuff that I could use the feedback on, because I had to set the stage for this. The whole idea about these videos was to piggyback them on top of the Star Citizen universe, because when I first got involved with this, and when I saw how ambitious the roadmap was, and this was the early days of delays and stuff, and we went to the convention, and we're going to put out a roadmap, we're going to put out a new update every 3 months, and we're just on fire for it. But as more and more stuff got moved off the roadmaps, and they stopped doing roadmaps, and they stopped doing updates, and then everybody vanishes, I realized this is not going to be what I thought it was going to be in terms of like shared experience with lots and lots of people. And again, some people said, sorry to hear that. I'm sorry to hear it too. But Ed also said, I know you had a lot of time invested in it. It's like, that's okay. I got my money's worth. I'm not at all upset about that, and I'll continue to play it. But the entire idea, and one of the biggest obstacles to this entire idea of telling stories in 3D animation was the fact that it was somebody else's intellectual property. That has been a huge issue. It's one of the reasons why I kept it secret or as quiet as I could be. Its primary reason that it's a real problem is that we can't monetize anything we do. We could tell tremendous stories, can't make a dime off of it if they're set in the Star Citizen universe. And so, to give you an idea of what my thinking has been for the last several months, my thinking has been, as it began to dawn on me that this is not going to be the kind of shared experience that is going to be widely known by people. Then, if you take the video game out of it, what's left? And it turns out that and I've said this from the beginning, that the writing on the Star Citizen, the whole Star Citizen writing team is the worst I've ever seen. It's just absolutely, shockingly, appallingly bad. In every aspect of it, from the dialogue to the the speeches that these people make in the trailer for Squadron 40. It's just terrible. And after 3 years now of being involved with this game, I couldn't tell you anything about the political structure. I couldn't tell you anything about what's going to happen. I couldn't tell you anything about, in terms of the universe. I couldn't tell you anything about what happened in the last 15, 20, 30 years. I can't tell you about any of it. All that there is and remains is that it's just a beautiful thing to watch. It's a beautiful thing to fly. It's fun to fly. And that's it. And the thing that I think is the most important thing in all of this is simply this, and that's the Unreal 5 engine. Unreal 5 not only looks brilliant, really photorealistic, good, but through some method that I have absolutely not the faintest idea, and I've been in this business for a while, I don't have any idea how they're doing this, but they are able to render in real time with billions of polys, billions of triangles. They're loading assets that are 400 or 500 megabytes, and they're all being loaded at the same time, and it's still working. I don't know how they do it. But my point is this. Star Citizen has always, to the degree that it's been successful and has raised money, it's been successful and raised money because it looks so good. Their ships look so good. Their art department looks so good. The planets look so good. It's just breathtaking. And it still is. But it's not going to be. As Unreal 5 and other game engines come out, it's just not going to be the best looking game out there. And that, I don't know what that does to them. They dug themselves a hole with this CryEngine 3 that is, I don't know how they're going to get out of it. In any event, so again, that's that. So I'm looking at this whole idea from the ground up, really trying to figure it out. And I said, so what, given the fact that it's somebody else's intellectual property, what do I get out of setting it in the Star Citizen universe? What do we get out of it? And the more I thought about it, the more I realize we don't get anything. What I wanted was a common language for the planets, so we all knew what Daymar is and the moons, and I wanted the ships, I wanted the constellations, and I wanted the Avengers and all the other stuff. Those things were pre-packaged props, costumes, and locations that were available for me to work with in terms of telling stories. I've spent the last 2-3 years working on the technology into that, and I'll get to that in a minute. But I don't think this game is going to be what we thought it was going to be. And so now the balance pan tips to where setting it in the Star Citizen universe is messaging still to young people still the goal? Absolutely. I'm sorry to be so deep in the weeds with this. Quaison, but it takes a lot of setup, and I haven't made any firm commitments yet, but I got a pretty good feeling about this. And again, I'm still on the setup. I haven't really gotten to the point yet, as usual. So I started asking myself, well, if you were to just, it was a two-step process. I started thinking, okay, I'm going to just leave the Star Citizen universe out there, and we'll connect to it, but we'll be running away from that universe to set up our own America in space and so on. And then it became like, well, if you still stay connected to it, you can't monetize this thing, you can't Kickstarter the thing, you can't grow it, you can't do anything. So I finally have been thinking, no, we're just going to do what I've always wanted to do, which is basically create a science fiction franchise, and this is the long-term goal. And so now this is where my thinking is going. The biggest hit is the ability to use the spaceships, which look fantastic. Now, there are a large number of spaceship models out there. I ran one last week. I'll show it to you here. This, not last week, a month ago, something like that. You can take a look at this. So that looks an awful lot like a ship in a Star Citizen universe called the Reclaimer, but I hate the textures. I just hated it. I was trying to think of a word to describe those textures, and the only word I can think of is Baroque. It's just way, way, way too busy. Way too busy. So I'm working on retexturing all this other stuff. So here's finally at the long last, here's the basic pitch. I think I'm going to be telling this story from scratch. It's the same story. It's about America in space. It's about leaving the society that you're part of and essentially becoming a traitor to the motherland because the world that you're living in is falling apart. And that's going to stay. And I want to make it much more exploration rather than just trade runs and piracy. And now comes the part where I could really use some interesting feedback on this. So now I have to decide the most important things, and it's not filling in the details. And there are thousands and thousands of 3D models out there, and I've looked at all of them. So here's what I'm going with. The most important thing, and the thing upon which everything else breaks out to, is how much magic do I want to use? If I do this in my own universe, then I will eventually, in a year, be able to do the entire Aurora movie, the first one, the one I wrote in 2005 about the trip to Jupiter. I'll be able to just do it. In fact, I thought that the first scene in this new revised version would be cool to have that Aurora ship from the renderings that I did. Oh, I've got that handy. Hang on here a second. This guy. It's untextured, but nevertheless. I thought, hey, what if this was like the first thing you see in the video, and then it's orbiting there, and you think, oh, it's about this ship, and it turns out, nope, that's a space museum. This ship is 200-300 years old. So I get to create my own universe, and the thing about this movie based on this ship was that I was going to do this trip to Jupiter, and there was going to be no magic in it. None. So that meant no magic weapons, no hyperlight drive, no, ray guns in space, all of that stuff. And now I have to decide where do I draw that line? And you could take the spectrum basically like this. On one hand, you have Star Wars, where you've got space fighters turning and banking. You've got, visible lasers that are moving slower than bullets, and you've got artificial gravity, and you've got hyperspace or warp drive or something, and you're able to move from one solar system to another with relative ease, or wormholes or whatever the case may be. That's That's the completely cinematic end with zero science, where the science is utterly out the window. In Star Citizen, for example, your sensors can detect things all the way out to 7 kilometers, in deep space, or 12 or something. So there's that. On the other end, there's a world where you could tell it without any of this stuff, tell it as realistically as you possibly could. But I got to tell you, I just don't think that's cinematic enough. So right now, in terms of setting up the framework of this, the biggest question I'm facing right now it's a real simple one, and that is, do I want to go with faster than light travel, yes or no? The argument against it is that first of all, it's kind of easy. The argument against like hyperlight travel is that it's easy, it's a little lazy, and there doesn't seem to be any way to actually do it. Now, is that facing the reality of the universe, or is that just a technological problem? I don't know. I told you the first half of the show is going to be science fiction, so this is, if you're here for the politics, go make yourself a sandwich. There are some advantages to not being able to go faster than light. If you could postulate something that is an engineering problem rather than a physics problem, and that is a really, really, really efficient engine that really could just put a lot of thrust out for a reasonable amount of fuel. Then, if you could get a ship up to 80%, 90% of the speed of light, you start to get some time dilation effects. But to be honest with you, they're not really significant until you get to the 90s. Just to give you an example, I found this really cool time dilation number. So if you want to go at 80% of the speed of light and you want to go 10 light years, it would take you 12 years from Earth, but it'd take you 7 years on the ship. If you went to 90% of the speed of light, it would still take you 11 years from Earth, because you're moving faster, but it would only take you 4 years on board the ship. And as you get higher and higher and higher, that dilation becomes more and more effective at 97% of the speed of light. 10-year trip would take 10 years and 2 months on Earth, assuming you just hit the speed right away. But it only take 2.5 years on the ship, and so on. Now, the problem, of course, is that the closer you get to the speed of light, the more time slows down. That's good, but the more the ship mass appears to increase, and that's bad. One of the things that's in favor of not having faster than light travel is there's something just very cool about that kind of aliens sort of, even though alien ships traveled faster than light, that kind of we're out in the darkness kind of thing. We are way out there, and we're going to be asleep for 3 years, 4 years. None of that bothers me scientifically. That should all be fairly straightforward to do. So, the reason I said that the faster than light stuff is lazy is because if it turns out that you can't, then all of these spaceships and stuff suddenly take on completely different aspects. Space fighters are gone, period. They're just plain gone. Detection is the width of the solar system. The heat signature against the background is, people say, oh, you can mask it. I don't know. But the main thing would be that virtually all of the traffic, the kind of the private spaceships, the truckers and the pirates and all that other stuff, would take place within a solar system. And then when you go from one solar system to another, I was thinking about like these giant, enormous ships. A friend of mine called them dromedaries after camels. Huge ships. And you would take all of these kind of privately owned ships and you just load all this stuff onto this thing, and then you'd send that out to the next solar system. And then it'd get unloaded at the other end. But it'd have to be gigantic to justify the scale issue. So hard to imagine trading something if you just got a little private trader. You know, you had a little ship with a crew of 10 or 15. You're going to go to sleep for 6 years to get to the nearest solar system, and you're going to try and sell stuff. You don't know what, you just don't know. So stay with me because I know this is all over the place. The problem with one of the many problems with not having a hyperlight drive is that it takes you, even if you could get to 90% of the speed of light, it takes you a long time to get there. As I recall, somebody said it's happily, coincidentally, it's about 1 g acceleration for a year, gets you pretty near the speed of light. And that gave me a cool idea. I thought it'd be cool if you could take these giant starships out to the edge of the solar system. They have to be at the edge of the solar system because you need things to move slowly out there. And it's not a gravity well issue or anything like that. But the thought occurred to me that if you could take something like the size of a big asteroid or a small planetoid, like maybe the size of Charon or something like that, and if you could drill a hole straight through it, you could magnetically accelerate a spaceship using the mass of the planet to anchor the acceleration. And if you were far enough out in the solar system, you probably could have arranged 2 or 3 of these things in a line. But the idea of starting at 0 and then just going down this tunnel that goes right through a planet and you're just being accelerated at, 20 Gs or something like that, and you're blasting out of this planet, and then you sail on for another, 13 minutes or whatever the case may be, and then you get to the next one, and it's just this giant thing getting the little dot in the middle. Certainly we have the technology to do this navigationally now. Just a little dot, and this thing getting bigger, and there's a dot, and through the dot you go, and the second you get in there, boom, you're just getting railgunned. And then the railgun gets you up to a significant part of that. You light the engines in the back. Maybe you do that 3 times. You sleep for 4 or 5 years, you get to the other place, and presumably at the other place, you'd go right through another series of these holes. You'd have to be able to maneuver the planetoid somewhat in order to slow down. And I thought that might look really, really cool. And it is a new way of doing things because now you're back to the 1800s. Now you're back to Hornblower, which is Roddenberry's whole idea for the original Star Trek series. Subspace radio communications were a cheat that came in later. The entire idea was that Kirk was going to be out of touch. He is the Federation. He's not calling back for instructions. He is the Federation. And that's what Roddenberry was trying to capture. And when I say it takes you back to the 1700s, 1800s, Britain, the Royal Navy, had fleets, had individual ships all around the world, and they were at least 6 months out of communication with London. So that these guys don't know if England's at war with France or at war with Spain or Allied. They don't know. If you have slower than light travel, then you have that situation where you're arriving and a radio signal is getting there and back a little bit faster. But if a message comes to you and you're going at a significant speed of light and you're halfway there, can you get the message back? And so it creates enormous amounts of writing issues. It requires a lot of imagination, which is good, which is really, really good. And again, I did want to preface this by saying you're just going to get the geek talk at the beginning. We'll talk politics in the end. The other thing this is something I've never heard anybody talk about, ever. But we did that, Bill Whittle Now, about some evidence that something was moving backward in time. I think that's seen by 350,000 people. And so when you say that we want to travel faster than light, you've already built in time. Time is so built into our experience, needless to say, that we're utterly unaware of it, and we're utterly unaware of the presence of it. If we are moving through, as I think we are, if we are moving through a 4th dimension at the rate of 1 second per second, physically moving through a 4th dimension that we can't see because we have 3-dimensional eyes, then that dimension is a dimension it's got axes. Now, it occurred to me that if you were going to go from here to Alpha Centauri, you would be moving through space, but you'd also be moving through time. You'd be moving through this thing called space-time. And everybody's talking about how you could go faster than light through space. But no one's, and people are talking about folding space with wormholes and stargates and stuff to shorten the distance. But no one that I've ever heard has ever dealt with the issue of not moving the ship through space, but getting it out of time, getting it out of a timeline. The theory of space-time is that space consists of 3 dimensions of space plus time, but time is a 4th dimension. If you could lift a ship out of time and you had a strong enough arm, you could throw a baseball to Alpha Centauri. And if you could take the baseball out of the 4th dimension, then it doesn't matter how slow it's actually moving, because slow is just a measure of distance over time. If you could get the thing out of the 4th dimension, then you could move at speeds that are well slower than the speed of light. And it's not just a dilation effect. It's not just for the people on the ship. The actual vehicle has been lifted out of space-time so that time no longer affects it. And to give you an idea of that, as I've mentioned a couple times before, here's a little object. Okay, what is this? A 3-dimensional object? Everybody would say it's a 3-dimensional object. It's got height, it's got width, it's got depth, but it's not a 3-dimensional object. It's a 4-dimensional object. It's got height, it's got width, it's got depth, and it's got duration. It's here now, and it was here earlier, and it'll be here for a while. So it's 4th dimensional coordinates match its 3-dimensional coordinates. It's got duration. It's moving through time. So if you were to take one dimension away and just visualize the vertical dimension as time, here's Earth and here's Alpha Centauri, and as a ship moves at slower than the speed of light, they're all moving forward in time. This is increasing time. And they're moving forward through time, moving forward through time, moving forward through time. And the longer it takes for it to go from here to here means the higher that this goes, and this means more time. It's taking longer for the journey. But if you could figure out how to get this thing on a space-only thing, then instead of it moving like this, it's essentially moving like that. It's very slow in 3 dimensions, but slow has the 4th dimension built into it. You see what I'm saying? Oh, it's slow. What does that mean? What does it mean it's slow? It means it's moving from here to there slowly. So it's taking a lot of time to move from here to there. Yeah. Well, what if the thing was not traveling through time-space? What if it was just in its own time bubble? Then it would be instantaneous, right? You turn it on, it starts traveling through space-time, except not through time. Turn it off, it's there. It moved at an inch a year. Doesn't matter. Anyway, that was a thought that I'd had for a kind of a drive. I'm leaning towards not having faster than light travel, and I'm leaning towards rules that look something like this: very high efficiency engines. That means you can move rapidly through solar systems, days or weeks. To move from one solar system to another can be done, but it would be a major event. These ships would be so enormous that if you wanted to take your ship with it, you would just basically put it in there, bolt it down, and then get this thing going as fast as you could, and then just put everybody to sleep. And hibernation thing, I'm not too worried about the technology on that. You go to sleep, you wake up, you're there. 7 years have passed in the real world, 9, 10. How would you know? You wouldn't know. It's not like you're going back to Earth. You wouldn't know. Even the signal from there to get here to tell you that you missed all this stuff is going to take time to get there. You wouldn't know. You would leave here, you would head to some place that you think you know, knowing that when you get there it's going to be 10 years later. I'm saying forget the whole moving through time thing. So it's sublight. Real hard sci-fi. So if I'm going from here to there, it's going to take 10 years, my time. or real time, let's say, a little less for me because it's time dilation and sleeping and stuff. I go to sleep, I wake up, I'm arrived at the other solar system. There's no difference for me as a crew member between that and the wormhole, right? Really? There's no real difference between that and the wormhole, and there's no real difference between that and me traveling at warp 3 or warp 9 or whatever. Yes, you've got you if the Enterprise is here and it needs to go there and it needs to go there fast, it'll go at warp 8. And you know how long it'll take to get there? It will take precisely as long as the story wants it to take. And the same thing is true for wormholes. So if you're basically saying, all right, so we get in the ship, we're going to go to another star, great. We get on board, we go to sleep. When we wake up, we're there. It just is 11 years later instead of 11 hours later. I think that's really the way to go. I really think it's the way to go. So I'm really been thinking quite a lot about all of this, and then the biggest part of it is writing the backstory. In other words, if these people are leaving to go form American space, I'd spent a lot of time on that trip and encountering people that had tried it before. Lots and lots of derelicts, lots and lots of dead colonies, lots and lots of other stuff. So far, so good. In the original idea, they were leaving the Star Citizen universe behind. And if that doesn't happen anymore, then you have to sketch in that universe at least well enough so that if you're going to tell the story of the American Revolution, you have to know enough about England so that your story makes sense. You don't have to sketch England into the same detail that you sketch in the colonies, but you got to know what England is. Otherwise, leaving England doesn't make any sense. And I thought, well, what does that future look like? And now we get to the part that for those of you who are just completely bored by science fiction, now we start to get to the stuff that you might find interesting, because the only reason to do this is for the political message and telling the bigger story. What if this, it's always the Earth Empire? I'm not doing that. I'm just not. It's just too easy for me. The United Earth Empire, the Earth Empire, the Terran Empire, Traveler was the only thing that did that right, and Traveler had dukes and nobles and barons, and it was, all of that stuff. So if we were to have an interstellar civilization and we were going to leave it, what would it look like? Well, since nobody knows whether we can do it or not, or if we do, what it's going to look like, we can make it anything we want it to be. And so if we want to tell a political story, then now, like I said, now it starts to get a little more interesting, folks. We want to tell a political story, then the world of the existing world that they start out in, the world that these characters leave in order to go and start their own kind of, utopian America in space thing. The world that they leave has to look as much like the things that we hate about the world today. So the world that they leave has to be degenerate morally, has to be clearly in decline. Law and order need to be breaking down. The people that do the protecting of the society have got to be the villains of the society. In other words, what if this thing were to start by having a bunch of these guys in the Navy looking at a TV screen and seeing people rioting because a naval vessel opened fire on a civilian vessel and blew it out of the water, assuming it was pirates, but it wasn't pirates. They were just civilians. And this guy in that particular ship was known to be kind of a renegade, overly aggressive captain. And now the entire society is rioting and talking about defunding the Navy or the Space Force, whatever you want to call it. Now, you immediately know where you are. Because now you are A world full of Karens, Mr. Subtle. Perfect. That's exactly where I was going with it. I didn't have the thought to get it quite so cleanly. Yes, they're leaving planet Karen, and they're leaving the Karen colonies. What what they're leaving is is administrative hell, and they're leaving this unholy alliance between huge corporations and and a gigantic government administration. I don't want to make corporations the bad guys like an Alien exclusively, but I do want to make that idea that yeah, there are these mega corporations and they and the government are just essentially the same thing. They provide the money to get the people elected, and then the government writes laws to protect them, just like the way they protect the tech giants like Apple and so on. So, so what you're leaving is you're leaving a world in decline. You're leaving a world where the trash isn't being picked up, and you're leaving a world where all of the kind of blue team values are becoming more and more ascendant every day. And worse than that, you leaving a world where the blue team is turning on the red team, turning against them because they don't feel like they need them. And then all the red team wants is what the red team always wants, is we just want to get the hell out of here and be left alone and not have to pay all these taxes and be told what to do. But then you get to use your imagination. Then you get to really open up what you can do, and it becomes a lot more. Hey, look, is that you there, Julius? Just arrived. You missed something earlier. If that's you, just let me know in the comment section. Oh, yep, that was him. We talked about you at the beginning, Julius. We said it earlier, but we'll say it again. Congratulations! If you go back and watch this on YouTube, you'll know that the first 10 or 15 minutes were about you, and we were just very, very happy for you and Valerie, and so waiting for your video. But in any event, congratulations! We're all very, 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 very happy for you. Very proud of you, and everybody feels like a part of that family. So there you go. So this is kind of where my head is right now, and I have to tell you, I just feel so good about it. I just feel so good about it. Be able to start with a clean sheet of paper is great, and to be able to own the property is everything. This was the end goal of my life since I was 16. This is what I wanted to do since I was 16. And it looks like we have the technology to do it. So right now I'm touching everything. I'm learning Unreal Engine pretty fast. I didn't like the textures on that model I showed you, so I'm learning Substance Painter. I've had a fair experience with 3D Studio, so some of that's easier than others. And I'm just everywhere. And hired some people and freelancers from Italy and Ukraine. They do great work, and they don't cost a whole lot of money. So I just have a couple more pictures to show you, and then guess we'll wrap it up, and we'll move on and talk some politics. Julia says he's following Bill's advice on how to live new life in the USA. He's got enough guns and ammo to make a Somali warlord proud. Congratulations, my man. You have finally arrived. So take a look at this. You all have seen those renderings I did of this John Boyd character. I wanted to get that face really badly. And I actually made some effort to hire some people to do it. It's exceedingly expensive. Where is it? Yeah, this is the face that I wanted, and I was going to try and get this into as photorealistic a place as I could. Oh, that's kind of cool. It's a JPEG. I mean a PNG, so it's got this clear background. I wasn't expecting that. So that's the face I wanted. And right now, in order to do enough of a demo to show people how this thing would work, in order to raise some money, and now again, like I say, a Kickstarter is on the table and that sort of thing. I've got to do something else. So I think what I'm going to do is, at least temporarily, for the sake of the demo, is I'm going to use the limited number of available heads that have already been scanned, and instead of costing $2,000-3,000, they cost about $50. I bought this one already. And I put it into Unreal Engine, and it needs some more work with the textures, but it looks really very good. And the company that's doing most of these, most of the good ones, there's a number of people out there, but the guys that are doing the best looking ones are from, they're English. And unfortunately, since they're in England, the people that they're scanning, you're talking to a person who's fully one half British, but the people who they're scanning look kind of like, British weenies. I can give you some examples. First, let me show you a couple more of that face. I bought the faces, $50. Here's what the model looks like. You'd add your own digital hair, obviously, but you can see that's a full order of magnitude beyond that Boyd thing I showed you. Might be able to change the face around too. These guys do something actually very interesting, and that is that they retopologize the head so that all the different faces fit on all the different meshes. So you could put a photorealistic black skin texture onto that model, and you get something completely different. Let's see. This is a pretty good, I just showed you that actually. Here are two just different views from the lighting. And then I've got, come on. Oh, these are TIFFs. They're not going to go in. It doesn't matter. And I've, for those pro clutching out there, I've sanitized this image just a little bit. This is a different model. But, I did not. Sorry, wrong one. I'm so frickin' embarrassed. Where did it go? It's not that there's anything to see, I mean, I just did put a little black bar over it. I mean, the guy's he's a Ken doll, neutered. Where did I put that? Did I not save that? Line up copy. So just to get this up there so you can have a better look at it. Like I said, I'm just trying to be respectful of people as much as I can. There it is. That's better. This guy is $40 or something, and that's all done out of photographic scanning. So this is an order of magnitude beyond what I was expecting to be able to do, and I'm able to do it pretty much right out of the gate. There's a number of models that they've got there. Some of them are, 2 or 3 of them are usable. The rest of them look like they look like a bunch of pasty-faced Europeans, and I can't really feel like I can use them. I'll show you the give you an idea what I'm looking at here. Come on. I'll find it. And it's funny because when I started seeing these heads that they had available, and they have something like 50 of them or 100, you include the women. And I thought, great. And then I started looking at the actual faces, and I thought, meh. Hang on. 1024. Here we go. So yeah, so I'll show you what I mean. But nevertheless, with these kind of photographic scans of people, I can get these guys animated pretty much right away. Come on, website. So it's moving along. I'm touching everything. I'm moving slowly through pretty much everything, but we're actually making progress. I'm getting real comfortable with Unreal Engine, which is important and is going to pay big dividends. And when Unreal 5 ships, it's going to be bloody amazing. Try this one more time, and if I don't get, come on. Uh, 10, 24. I'm going to just stay with this for one more second, so help me God. Now that I've gone and way out on a limb and said that they all look like Euro weenies, I'm going to have to defend myself with some evidence here. Here. Okay, so these are scanned heads. They look fantastic in terms of their fidelity. How big is that image? Come on, you miserable. There it is. It's going to be a low-res copy, but it'll be enough to get you the idea. So it's like, I don't really want to hire any of these people. But nevertheless, it does give me something to work with. So this one may be better. This one does show you some somewhat better better faces, a few somewhat better faces. Come on. All right, this is getting annoying. This is the last time I'm going to spin on it if this doesn't work. Oh, there it is. Okay. So you can see, come on. Yep. There we go. So, I mean, if I was casting, I would take bottom left guy. I'd take number 2 on the bottom. I'd take the old man, and maybe 2 or 3 others. But it's enough to do photorealistic stuff for the demo, and then I can just go and scan, real models, or maybe by then they'll have decided to scan some Americans so they can increase their sales. Wallowing in my own crapulence now. So that's about it, really, I guess. And it's just the intent hasn't changed at all. The intent is 100% what it was before. I just am trying to weigh the pros and the cons of basically the Star Citizen sputtering development, and it occurred to me that the game is no longer worth the candle. That the benefits of going off on your own and making your own rules and so on are going to outweigh it. By next week or the week after, I'll have some pretty good test renderings of things to show you to give you an idea of atmosphere and that kind of thing. That's it for the sci-fi update. So now, let's go to Facebook and see what we got in terms of questiones. Thanks for sitting through that with me. A lot of times I just need to kind of talk it out to get an idea, and then I'm watching the comment sections very closely, and people are kind of like this, and not so much that, and it's really useful feedback. Okay, so what do we got here? I don't understand the first question, Merlin, to be honest with you. I just don't understand it. So we got a couple, we got 3 Eric Blakes in the top 5 or 6. So, hi, hey, Eric, how are you? We'll just go ahead and take it from there. I want to be able to put the comments over here so I can see what's going on, as always. Right. What are the odds of Alfonso, Rachel, and you joining forces to kick butt against the left's agenda on the internet? I think they're relatively high, but I don't think we'll be doing it on camera. He still remains my choice for the second basic lead in this thing. You did, however, remind me to show you guys a couple of images that you might find interesting. And this goes to the Alfonso Rachel thing because I'd love to have Zoe do one of the voices on this. So here's some numbers that I put together. Just some interesting pieces of data. Just trying to find the right ones here. So here you go. If you take the top, I'm not saying I'm in the top 5, but and this data is at least a year old. I didn't check Mark Dice, but here, take a look at this. Here are 5 conservative websites. 5 conservative YouTube channels. Okay, and you can see the numbers there. Now, let's take a look at these were the top 5 at the time, but they're probably not now. But stay with me. This goes to the whole Zoe thing, guys. If you were to take the top 5 gaming channels, however, and put them next to there, here's what you would see. So you can see that I've got Turning Point USA at the time at 117,000 subscribers. Laserbeam had 10 million. Crowder has 3.7 million. PewDiePie has 95 million. If you take the total views on all of us on the left, on the front page of the conservatives, and then you take the total views on the front page of the liberals, you get some very, very interesting information. And I will show that to you. Just to give you an idea, here's a comparison with TPUSA's views versus a gamer named Shroud who's not even close to PewDiePie. But that's, if you go to the top 20 videos on their home pages, this is what you get. And PewDiePie is more or less on our side. So here's the money graphic right here. Let's see if I have a better version of that. Hang on a sec. I do somewhere. I've got a graph that's total gamers versus total conservatives, but this is close enough. It's within a percentage point of this. So basically what I'm saying is this. All of the conservative content that you saw on those YouTube channels, all of the conservative commentary fits inside that orange pie slice, and no one is talking politics to the purple pie slice. This is Shroud versus TPUSA, but the number for total gamers versus total conservative commentators is virtually identical. Virtually identical. So you really have to ask yourself, if you really want to make a difference, why are we swimming and putting all of our resources and all of our money and all of our effort? Why are we putting everything into that orange pie slice, which parenthetically has heard the message before, while meanwhile no one in the purple group has really ever gotten the message in a realistic way. So it's just a tremendously powerful video for me. I'm trying to find the one that I usually just keep on the desktop. It's just so good. 1 second. I'll see if I can find it. If not, I'm not going to waste a whole lot more time. But it's the graphic. Here, come on, are you in there? I don't seem to be. All right, doesn't matter. So there you go, folks. That's the ratio roughly between, very very close actually, the ratio between what the top five or six, the top six conservative commentators get versus the top six gaming commentators get. And that's telling me that that big purple area is untouched, and that furthermore, that big purple area is the future. Those are the people who are coming into the Vale of Tears and not leaving it. So when I say I'd like to be working with Zoe, I would very much like to be working with Zoe. I'd like to be working with Zoe on the writing of some of these things as well. But my certain hope it would be when I say working with Zoe, I've already spoken to him about it. That was a while ago. I'd like him to be doing the voice on one of these science fiction characters, pistol packing, laser gun shooting kind of, space guy. Somebody mentioned big bat problems, so this is my thinking. If I go this route and go back to a world where it's my own intellectual property, I spend a year or two or three or whatever telling these stories, redoing the whole America in space thing. And by the way, one of the major points about the American Revolution that never really occurs to us, it certainly doesn't seem to be landed on us very often, is that it must have been galling, really must have been a bitter, bitter pill for many of the founding fathers to break their ties with Great Britain and the King. And the reason I know this is because I'm going to be facing the same situation in this story. In other words, we did an episode on this not too terribly long ago. Just kind of danced around it. But what if you decided to leave America to go someplace that was freer? And there was a place you could go where you could be left alone. And it was a red state, and let's just say for the sake of it, it's Antarctica, just to make it nice and simple. We're going to go colonize Antarctica, and Antarctica is going to become the American dream. There's going to be no taxes, the state regulation, all the stuff that we hate is gone. It's going to be just like starting all over again. Okay, but you have to renounce your U.S. citizenship. That's hard. Then what happens if you find yourself trying to defend that place, and you're trying to defend yourself against a vessel that's flying the American flag? It may be flying the flag of Karenized America. It's not really America anymore. It's not the country you grew up in. It's not the deal you originally made. But nevertheless, it's not something that's easy to do. And you think about the American Revolution and you think, the Americans versus the British. It was the British versus the British. I mean, they were British subjects. They had loyalty to the king. They took this very seriously. It must have been very, very hard for them to, number one, now not to say that they didn't have plenty of good reasons, but it's got to sting. If you're a former Royal Naval officer and then basically you join the Colonial Navy and you have to open fire on a British warship, wow. It's tough. So, Eric, I'd love to be working with Zoe. I love the guy. And he's just one of the best voices out there, and he got absolutely silenced by this shadow banning because he's a dangerous, dangerous guy as far as the left is concerned. But my hope would be that I get to... I don't know if you've ever seen him act, by the way. The guy's a tremendous actor. He's really good. He's very, very good. And so, so we'll see. Let's see. Susan Speakman. Is the 2020 election going to be similar in some ways to the 2016 election, and that Trump will again make liberal heads explode by winning, if not in a landslide, at least quite handily? Or is 2020 Biden's year? I have been thinking for quite a while that Trump was going to win 50 states. And if I had to bet, that's still how I would go with a Trump win. But I have to say that the last 3 weeks or so, he's pretty much been, kind of off the map. And And to my astonishment, uh, Natasha spent some time with some liberals and just through some work she was doing and just being nice and quiet as she always is and polite and listening to them. And somehow the people who live in Los Angeles, who've seen the homeless population simply explode, who've watched their buildings being boarded up and Beverly Hills shops smashed, and seen homeless people under every single freeway overpass now, tents, cities of them. These liberals think this is Donald Trump's fault. And that's inconceivable to me. But you could say that you're never going to win those people over. I think in terms of the election, honestly, Susan, if people are suing to get out of Manhattan, to break their leases so they can leave Manhattan, which is the bluest of the blue places in terms of ideology, and they want to move out to the country, then that's telling me the whole country is moving to the right as a result of all of these riots and all the rest of it. I think Trump handled it really well at first, and I think making it a federalist issue and not falling into the trap of opening fire on those people, that was smart. But I haven't seen much of him lately, and he needs to step up, I think. But with that said, the polls right now look really terrible for Trump. But as we pointed out, it's Trump versus it really is Trump versus generic Democrat, because no one's seen much of Joe Biden unless you're really on the news as we are and the stuff we talk about here. But Biden says he's going to debate Trump. I just cannot see that happening. But if it turns out that he doesn't, then Trump will make mincemeat out of him. And if it turns out that he does, then the election's all over. A lot's going to depend on who the vice presidential nominee for the Democrats is, because I think it's not even a secret. I think it's just everybody understands that Biden is not going to be president. That even if he's elected, he's not capable. Helios 1776 said he thinks Biden's not going to be the candidate. I kind of agree with him. I looked at the rules for this, and if it turns out that Biden becomes the official nominee, he's got the lock on the nomination, but he hasn't actually been nominated yet. So they can stage manage the Democratic convention well enough for Biden to accept the nomination. Here's where it gets interesting. If Biden accepts the nomination, becomes the official nominee of the Democratic Party, after that point and before the election, if something should happen to him, now I know he knows Hillary Clinton well, but let's just say he is persuaded to retire, then the Democratic candidate is selected by the Democratic National Committee with input from governors and higher up, but basically they just pick. And I think that's basically what the plan is. I think that if I had to pick the most likely case, I think that they're just going to drag Biden through the nomination process. He will be the official nominee, at which point then the left will start to bring out all of the touchy-feely, Uncle Creepy stuff, convince Biden to step down because of health and how Donald Trump is basically taking all of the life out of him, and so on and so on and so on. And then they will appoint a new candidate. Woody Fool says the vice presidential candidate becomes the choice for president. I don't believe that's true. I don't think that's necessarily true. I think they can just pick who it's going to be. I was a little worried it would be Andrew Cuomo, but not anymore. He's responsible for half of the deaths in, or is it Chris? I always get these two mixed up. Not Fredo, the other one. Yeah, he's responsible for half of the deaths in the country. He could be just crucified over this. So they'll pick somebody, I think. But if they don't, sometimes you keep thinking history is going to be more complicated than it is. Sometimes the simplest explanation is the easiest and the most truthful one. And sometimes, I'm always fascinated by how we always tend to put more drama into what we think is going to happen. We did this with COVID-19 and with everything else. We tell a better story than what actually occurs. And so I think that basically what's going on is that they'll probably run him. I mean, this idea of this big, change and conspiracy to change things, it's a relatively simple thing. It's not an actual conspiracy. So I think it's possible or even likely, but given how the future tends to disappoint you when it comes to being as dramatic, they'll probably just run him. And if they run him, I don't see how they win. I just can't see it. The, the Trump base is fired up. No one's going to be fired up about Biden. There'll be people fired up to get rid of Donald Trump, no question. But the whole COVID thing is a real wild card, and that's why the Democrats have done everything they can to make sure that the COVID-19 crisis lasts until the first Wednesday morning in November, at which point it'll be safe to come out again. But if it turns out that Biden is the nominee and Biden agrees to debate Trump, I honest to God, if that happens, I do not see a second and third debate. I just don't. I just don't see how that could happen. I don't. I think it's going to be. I think it's going to be what it was for those of you old enough to remember when. Was it 92 when Bill Clinton was running against George Bush Sr. and Ross Perot, and it became a three-way debate, and they had the three vice presidential candidates, and Ross Perot had selected Stockwell. I never can remember. I want to say Stockdale. Who was the hero at the Hanoi Hilton, but who was already showing significant signs of mental decline, and Stockdale, thank you. And when Admiral Stockdale was on in this three-way debate, it wasn't funny, it wasn't annoying, it was just cringe-inducing. Just you felt your heart just want to leap out of your chest from just sheer embarrassment and sympathy. I think Biden. I just can't imagine Biden debating Donald Trump. I can't. I can see it once. So I have a. Will Biden have a Stockdale moment? Biden is just one perpetual Stockdale moment. And as I've said before, I don't know if you saw the show that we did on it just a couple days ago, but I've watched this happen with my mom over the course of the last 10 or 15 years. It doesn't get better. It gets worse. And when the memory loss due to Alzheimer's is enough certainly to disqualify you because it's just frightening. What I'm also seeing signs of is I'm seeing signs of dementia in Joe Biden, which is showing itself in extremely aggressive lashing out. You know what I mean, fat? You dog-faced pony soldier. You think I don't have any mental abilities? Let's do some push-ups and see, all of it. I don't see any way that guy can beat Donald Trump, no matter how popular or unpopular Trump is. I just think I just don't see it. And I can't imagine who a vice presidential candidate would be. After the Democratic primaries, it seems like there were no rank and file Democrats that weren't on the stage at one point or another. And so you just, I don't know. I was driving to an interview that I was being interviewed for The Change last night. I was driving over the hill with Natasha, and I was being interviewed at the Beverly Hills Hotel. I was coming down the hill, and I was thinking about this whole election and heard some things that say, well, maybe things aren't as good for Trump as you thought. And I was just like, just the stomach is just churning. God, it's like it feels like an asteroid is on its way, and it's either gonna hit us or miss us on the first Tuesday in November, and that's what it feels like. And I think a lot of people feel that way. And I don't know where this came from, but just out of somewhere, I thought, if Biden wins the election, then that is very, very, very bad news. But it's not the end of the world. It's accelerating the end of the world, but it's not It's not the end of the world. But with that said, I don't know. I just think, I still think it's, I still think it's virtually impossible to imagine how the Democrats are going to win this, because they own this lawlessness, and that's what I was talking about. If people are leaving New York City, suing to get out of New York City, and if liberals are buying guns in record numbers, that's telling me that that reality is like, as I mentioned once or twice, it's like reality is this comet. It's like a comet. It appears in the sky every 30 years or so, and and when it's gone and out of sight, people can do really dumb things and just doesn't matter, you know. You can be radical chic and you can be down with the movement and all the rest of it. But when that comet of reality comes back, now there are consequences. Now it's not like, hey, they're burning down stores. Now they're burning down your stores. Now they're burning down Louis Vuitton. Now they're burning down stores on Saks Fifth Avenue. Now they're a quarter mile away from your house in Bel Air. It's not happening down in South Central anymore. I think that that it's going to be. They own it. They own this lawlessness, and the Democratic Party said that Donald Trump having a Fourth of July rally on Mount Rushmore, they said it was white supremacy. Now, here's what's interesting about that. Conservatives have been called racists and all the rest of it. And by the way, have you noticed that racist is losing its power? It's been overused so much. White supremacist is the new racist. But think about this. I mean, how many patriotic Democrats, and there are millions of them, have just for the first time ever been called white supremacists? This is really interesting to me. This is the first time that they've ever been called white supremacists. If you love this country, that makes you a white supremacist. And again, I don't know. I don't see. I think it's going to be big win, but there's still so much up in the air. I think, and this doesn't belong to me. This is a thought of somebody else. And told it to me in private, so I'm not going to tell you who it is, but it just tell you it's not my thought. But this person was saying that Trump had a chance to really tie this thing up when he said we're going to reopen the country by Easter, if he had actually done it. But he kind of listened to the people with the computer models. And so they've already reclosed Santa Barbara County. I have no doubt. I've been to restaurants. I've been to restaurants 3 times now, which is quite a statement for me here in California. They've just opened restaurants up to half capacity, and I was there, but they're talking about shutting it down again, and they're waiting for the vaccine. It's like this was never part of the deal. We always knew that the vaccine was going to take a year. So what's this waiting for the vaccine thing? Well, you lied to us, and we didn't get it in writing, so fooled us once, Anyway, America's not going to end, and it can't be divided because the mix. It's not like all the liberals live in one place and all the conservatives live someplace else, like it was with slavery, more or less. There's a line. Lots of people move, but still. Thought experiment: could Pence beat Biden? I think Pence would trounce Biden. I think Pence would have a much better chance to be president than Trump, because I think that Pence would carry virtually every single one of the Trump voters, and Pence would have a chance to appeal to people who just viscerally can't stand Donald Trump, and but I don't know. Who knows? It has been, I think Mobile Moto says we're very proud in Indiana on how Pence has conducted himself in office. I think he's done real well too. And of course, somebody says Pence is the enemy. I don't know how you get that. But in any event, it's always unpredictable. But this year is worse. There's just three wild cards now on the table. But the left is overplaying this thing. And I think the experience. Let's take those. Susan, we're talking about the 2020 election. Let's take those two people in, I forget where the hell it was now, who defended their house with weapons once the mob had broken into their gated community. And this guy was convinced he was going to be have his house smashed and maybe be killed or burned or whatever. What does that guy think now? The St. Louis defense attorneys, yeah. What do they think now? They were supporters of Black Lives Matter. They were big donors to democratic causes. They were atypical liberals because they had guns, and then they used guns, and then they were absolutely vilified by liberals. And they were vilified because they were terrified for their lives because of this movement that they supported. What are they thinking now? And I mentioned this before, by the way. This is my observation. I haven't heard anyone else really mention it. The reason why the left attacked them so hard wasn't because, as they claim, they were anti-Black Lives Matter and trying to intimidate Black Lives Matter. The reason that the left went after them as hard as they did and tried to utterly smash them is because the guns worked. That's what they can't handle. That's the part that they cannot abide. They defended their house with guns, and that is absolutely got to go. I haven't heard anybody else talk about that. The reason they hate him is because it worked. What are they thinking now? Are they still as loyal to the Democratic Party as they were before the Democratic Party tried to destroy them and this movement that they've been supporting to crash the gate on their house? And this is really what it comes down to, honestly, is that it's now hitting Democrats. It's hitting liberals. It's hitting them personally. It's one thing to watch stores burning down, but when it's your store, Louis Vuitton store, where you go shopping and you go down Beverly Drive and there's nothing but boarded up windows and smashed glass, now it's affecting you. It's not just a scarf you wear now in order to look cool in front of other liberals. Now it's actually affecting you. It's that comet, that reality comet's back in the game again, and all across the country. And by the way, one of the people that is suing to break his Fifth Avenue lease and get his company out of there is Jay-Z. Jay-Z, who's an enormous supporter of Black Lives Matter, is suing to get out of the lease that he has for top price commercial retail stores in Manhattan. And he is suing to get out of there because he can no longer protect his merchandise or his customers because of the movement that he's such a big backer of. I just don't know. I don't know. I still don't know of anybody that voted for Trump before and is not going to vote for him this time, well, except maybe Ann Coulter. And prior to this whole thing, the economy was humming. I know Trump's numbers compared to Biden right now are not good, but two things haven't happened yet. Number one, people haven't heard, people didn't hear Biden speak, and they don't know how far gone he is. And secondly, Trump has not yet begun to fight, and when he does, I think this is going to tilt quite a bit. Dave Olson's, we hear two sets of stories. One is that China is ascendant and that the other is on their last legs. Yes, both, or neither? I'm going to go... I don't really want to say neither because I'm not agnostic on this issue. Dave, they're not on their last legs, but they are certainly not ascendant. And if I had to pick which one of those two felt most correct to me, I would go with last legs. I've never been worried about China. ever. Let me rephrase that. I've been plenty worried about China, but I never thought that they were going to take the place of the United States in terms of it's not just even being the world's policeman. It's like you know I don't know if it affects you if you're ever amazed by this, but it amazes me. You'll see Somali pirates, and they're wearing like Chicago Cubs T-shirts, and you'll see you'll see people in the rainforest of Amazon, and they've got Adidas shorts on, and and if you look at like rock and roll bands in Japan or comics in Russia or whatever, they're all wearing American clothes. They're wearing football jerseys. They're trying to sound like rappers. It's not, nobody realizes how universal this American culture is because, well, let me rephrase that. We don't realize it because we just sort of naturally expect that. But it's astonishing. No one, is there anybody who's watching this now in the comment section live? Is there anyone who can name three Chinese actors? I don't mean Chinese actors who are acting in American movies. I mean three Chinese actors. Can you name? I mean, you can name some British actors, but the only reason you can, I don't think Bang Ding-ao is a real name. And Jackie Chan doesn't count because Jackie Chan, here we go. Jackie Chan is famous in America because he's made movies in English. Yeah, something wrong is not. I don't think that's. I don't think that's a real guy. But you see my point, right? Nobody knows. Nobody knows the top Chinese song. The only song I can think of that actually penetrated American culture and world culture that came from Asia in a foreign language was Gangnam Style, which is a great tune. That video is awesome. I've seen it 5 or 6 times. I've probably seen it 20 times. And he was Korean, and that's I cannot remember off the top of my head. There are others. 99 Luftballons, although they did an English version of that. That's what they mostly played. They mostly played the English version of Rock Me Amadeus. Honestly, what was the last time there was a huge hit in America that wasn't in English? It's just no. Now the big issue, and I'm not trying to say there's not a threat here, and I'm much more worried about American decline than I am about Chinese ascension. But even with that said, people have said, yeah, well, they graduate, 200 million engineers a year or something like that. And that's true. And that's significant because we're breeding a generation of idiots. And they're making engineers and great science, see, that I don't think they're great scientists. I think they're great technicians. And I don't even know if they're great technicians. Anyway, they're certainly better educated than we are. But if we were in the industrial era, that would really matter because you'd have guys, running factories and all of that stuff. But in the information age, it's the idea. This is an idea. It's an idea. It's not a manufacturing army. It's a simple idea that a guy had. And I don't see any indication that China is. I can't think of a Chinese invention. I can think of a lot of American inventions that are made in China. In fact, I can't think of very many that aren't, but that's changing. But it's the idea that matters. They're made in China because it's cheaper to make them there, but China can't make an iPhone. They couldn't invent the iPhone. They can reverse engineer the stuff we do. The whole Wuhan flu thing is a case of this virus getting out of their top level virology lab, and some people have said, and I think there's some some credence to it, is the only reason they had that virology lab in the first place is because America has one. So if we have aircraft carriers, then they'll have aircraft carriers, and if we have virology labs, they'll have virology labs. But their aircraft carriers are junk, and the score on their on the Wuhan Virology Institute is not super impressive. And so, they're driven by insecurity. They're driven by China's in the grips of the same thing that the Soviet Union was in the grips of for its entire existence, and that is showing everybody that they're as good as America. That America has this, well, we have that, and ours is bigger or taller or newer or whatever. And they just, what are they doing? I'm really looking. They say they're going to go. They're going to try to get to the moon, and they're going to try and get to the moon in the 20s. I personally think that they're going to be quite surprised that going to the moon is not as easy as the Americans made it look. There are so many things that can go wrong on a moon mission, and so many things that we had to do wrong before we got everything right. For them just to declare that they're going to go, I don't get it. Now, Dave points out that they're going to be going to the moon 70 years after we did, 60 anyway, something like that. Yeah. One moment. Hey, how are you? We're good. Thanks very much. Have a great night. Thanks. So, I'm not impressed. I've told the story about the American destroyer so many times, I'm not going to tell it again, but they're making 3 or 4 destroyers for everyone that we make, but that doesn't mean that they're any good. Their J-20 fighter jet, is, we've got J-20s on their aircraft carrier. Well, they don't have catapults. The new one does. But the fighter's engines are so weak that they can't carry any ordnance. They can fly off the deck and they can land, but they can't carry any weapons anywhere. And the only time that I will start to really, really worry about China is if Hong Kong absorbs China rather than the other way around. Even then, I still don't see it happening. Look, we got all these riots in the streets and all of this stuff, and we've got to find a way to stop this, and all the rest of this stuff. I'm not saying can't make out the name. I'm sorry. I got a comment saying I underestimate what China can do without being capable technologically. They're doing it everywhere. I don't underestimate China's ability to destroy things or damage things at all. I think that they're poised for a massive cyber attack. I wouldn't be at all surprised if there were chips in virtually everything that we own that basically shut down on their command. They can do an awful lot of damage. An awful lot of damage. They can really, well, they already have. They've destroyed the world economy. But that's not the same thing as thinking that they're going to take the lead, that they're going to be ascendant. They build our stuff. And if push came to shove, then we could build our own stuff, and it would cost more money. But they can't build this. They can't. It's not that they can't build what we can build. It's that they can't envision what we can build, and they can't do it because their society is so homogenous and conformity is so highly valued that they simply don't think outside the box. I'm not saying that they're not smart enough to think outside the box, and I'm also not saying that there are not millions of Chinese who do think outside the box. I'm saying that with their culture the way it is now, they've got no chance of actually doing anything with it. Does anybody think that it's possible for a Chinese inventor to just do something in his garage and change the world? No. How's he going to build this thing? How's he going to sell it? Where's he going to get the money for it from? It just doesn't happen. So I think let's put it this way, Dave. They're not on their last legs, but I think we have passed peak China. I really genuinely do. Now we just got to get our own house in order, which is, look, they're calling this a revolution. I just did the thumbnail for my 4th of July show, which basically says Antifa they're the Antifa are counter-revolutionaries. Americans are the revolutionaries. Antifa wants to return to a world of violence and mind control and conformity and authoritarianism and rule through pistols and anarchy, and the strongest eat the weak. It's the American Revolution that is the real revolution. And as I said on that show, there are people who are still willing to defend this revolution. So anyway, I think we'll be all right with that. That's a great question. Merlin, wonderful. Why can't liberals distinguish between a peaceful protester and a violent criminal? Aha, that's a great question. Give me a second, I'm cogitating. They certainly can tell the difference. They know that the violence and the looting looks terrible. And so they just pretend that it doesn't exist. It's all mostly peaceful protests. It's mostly peaceful protesters that are setting fire to that city. So it's not that they can't tell the difference. They can. They just don't want to see the difference. And this is the essence of progressivism, is doublethink. Doublethink is, if you don't understand doublethink, you'll never understand the Soviet Union or China or the reign of terror in France and in China and in Russia. If you don't understand doublethink, you'll never get progressives. Doublethink is the ability to have two contrary ideas and believe in them both as the need arises. And it's very, very difficult concept for conservatives to get their heads around. But as George Orwell said, doublethink is the ability to, on some level, know that 2 and 2 plus 4, but at the same time to agree that if the state says 2 and 2 plus 5, then they realize that that's what the meaning of 2 and 2 is it's 5. And it's not like they're saying, I'm going to say it's 5 because they hurt me if I don't. The doublethink essentially consists of saying the value of 2 plus 2 is determined by the state. That's the actual definition of what is 2 plus 2. And to say that 2 plus 2 means something other than what the state means is an illusion. It's very hard for us to get our mind around that, but that's how they think. And so when they see these protesters, they see them, but they don't see them. I mean, not the protesters, the looters. They see them, but they don't see them. They see them, but they ignore them, and they just doublethink them off the map. But as I said, sometimes the reality comet comes along, and you can't doublethink your way out of it. Some people will never ever be redeemed, obviously, but large numbers of people, I think, are waking up to the fact that this stuff that we believe is really kind of nasty. I wonder how many people in downtown Seattle are thinking about whether they made the right decisions voting for this governor and this mayor. And by the way, of all of the doublethink, it's not even doublethink in this case, Merlin. It's avoidance. It's simple avoidance. It's just, I don't want to think about this. It's unpleasant. It's this. Of all of it, the greatest example I've seen in quite a while is the mayor of Seattle, who said, "Don't be afraid of democracy, President Trump. They're just having a party. It's just a summer of love kind of a camp out. People are camping out in downtown Seattle all the time. I don't know what the big deal is." So this is what the progressive mayor of Seattle is saying during the whole Chaz Chop thing. And then the protesters broke onto her property, and she called the cops, who still apparently have enough funding to get to her property. And then she was outraged. And this is the ultimate form of avoidance and denial is the word, is that every single one of these liberals think that if they are confronted with the mob, all they will have to do is say, no, no, you don't understand. We're on your side. As if that's going to make a difference. This is the single thing that they can't see. Because see, I really think that this is so important. I don't hear a lot of people discussing this. I think really genuinely honest to God, I do believe this. I think the fundamental driver for belief in progressivism is personal physical cowardice. I really genuinely believe that. And I think it manifests itself in a number of ways. For example, if you're worried about being murdered, you know that my vote or my voice cannot eliminate insanity, because insanity is built into it's a failure mode that's built into humans. It's a 7 or 8 sigma failure, but nevertheless, there it is. So since they know that insanity cannot be abolished, and that the only way to deal with the murderously insane, the homicidally insane, would be to lock up crazy people, which they don't believe in because it goes against their values. They transfer all of that fear of being murdered onto the gun, because the gun is something that they can ban. It's something that they think that they can control. And since they think they can control the guns, that's where all of their fear and anxiety goes into the gun. Not into the guy pulling the trigger, but into the gun. And if we just got rid of the gun, then there wouldn't be any murders. Well, people start murdering themselves with knives. Well, then we'll ban knives then. And this is how they think. And the reason they think this way, Marlon, is because it allows them to feel like they have some kind of control. I failed to respond to Don Jr.'s Neuter Spencel's 500 text notice. They were saying they emailed me 3 times, and now they've told me I've failed to respond in capital letters. That's not great work there, guys. You don't want to do that. I don't know who's running your social media campaign, but threatening me and then telling me that I had my chance and I blew it is not smart. And so this is something they can control. And a bigger issue of the exact same dynamic is this idea that we got to get out of the Middle East. There are plenty of reasons to get out of the Middle East, but that basically we deserved 9/11. That's really where it lives. They think that we deserved 9/11, that we caused it. And the reason they think that is because the idea that there are people out there who want to kill them, no matter what they do, just because of who they are, is inconceivable to them. And so they say, well, the psychological dynamic is these terrorists are responding to what we do. And if we stop doing that, then they'll stop coming after us. So all we have to do is stop doing this, and that's stuff we can control. And therefore, I'm going to just simply make sure that we don't ever use the military again, or that we sink all of our Navy at the bottom of the ocean and cut up our airplanes. That way, other people will have nothing to fear us for, and if they don't fear us, they'll leave us alone. That's the mark of a coward, and it's moral cowardice to see that just doesn't work that way. I saw when the George Floyd things were at their worst, I drove down Ventura Boulevard, and I saw a large number of businesses boarded up, most of them for miles. Turned out that they were pretty well behind the curve. I think those buildings probably stayed boarded up for about a week. They're unboarded now. But I can count maybe 2 or 3 exceptions. But virtually every single one of them had spray painted on there, "We Heart BLM," # or hashtag BLM, Black Lives Matter. Now, some of those people are liberals who really believe this, but I actually think that almost all of them spray painting on your plywood to protect you from Black Lives Matter, spray painting, "We support Black Lives Matter." It is the exact same thing as dabbing the blood of the lamb on the lintel so that the angel of death passes over you. It basically says, hey, we're on your side. Don't smash down my store. We support you. And they really think that this is the case. They actually think that if you were to have a guy out there with these looters saying, no, 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 you don't understand. This store is owned by people who support Black Lives Matter. You shouldn't be smashing the store. You should smash the windows on that store and loot that guy who's a Republican store. They actually think the talisman, great word, Joyce is exactly right. It's a talisman. It's a charm, and it's like an amulet. We support Black Lives Matter. Please don't smash my store. As if it matters. As if they care. They don't care. Because the people who are doing the smashing and looting are not the people who are protesting. Well, some of them are. But they tend to think that this is like rational. It's not rational. It's irrational to expect that people behave rationally. Their life is filled with these kind of intentional avoidance and denial of the truth. But sometimes the fires get close enough to where they actually live. And back during the Rodney King riots, talked about this many times before the George Floyd thing happened. Liberals would, talk about what a wretched savage you are because you own guns. And then during the Rodney King riots, all of a sudden they give you a call and say, hey, you have a spare piece I can borrow just until this thing blows over? It's the comet comes back. The reality comet is back in the sky again. So they constantly see it and they tell themselves it's not true. But now it's starting to get into their lives. Here's an interesting comment. I got to get that name right just a second. Lumiere Frere. Would that be Brother of Light? I don't know. Bill, your whole arguments are based on a belief that you can reason with people. You are self-contradictory. I'm not, actually. I reason with the people who are capable of reasoning to give them the weapons of reason to use against other people who can reason. One of the reasons I spent the first hour talking about science fiction is because that is not a reasonable appeal. It's an emotional appeal. I like that guy. I don't like that guy. What I just saw, that guy getting murdered by a pirate, I don't like that. And so so I understand the difference, and I'm trying to work in both camps. It's true that you can't apply rational arguments to irrational people, but you can apply it to rational people. And one of the things that you need to convince rational people of is that people behave irrationally. Many people behave irrationally. So anyway, let's see. I said I was going to make this one extra long. We're 2 hours. I'm actually getting kind of hungry. So I'm going to keep going a little bit, but I may not get to the whole thing. Sorry, just... Daryl Green. Bill, we can't seem to count on politicians to do the right thing for the country or the people anymore, and this goes for both political parties. Is there a way out of this by, say, a new political party, or do we just need to fix it ourselves? I think what we're seeing now with all this lawlessness, tear down the statues, is I think we're seeing the progressives making a real dash for the door. Like, I've been watching progressivism disintegrate, and I've been watching the disintegration accelerate. And this is really important. I can't believe I didn't talk about this earlier. And I think they realize that everything that they've tried to do is failing, and now they're trying to really just. To be honest, Daryl, right now I think the left is playing hockey with the goalie not at the net. I think they're so far behind that they're risking leaving the goal intended to have an extra guy on the field. That's what it feels like to me. That they're all in now, and the clock is not helping them. And if they don't do something very, very big, then they're going to lose the game. And that means they're pulling their goalie out from the goal, and they're just taking that risk. And that's a big risk. It's a horrifying thing to watch. So they're trying everything they can to intimidate people with violence because time is not on their side anymore. And I said there was something very important that we haven't talked about, and it's hugely important. In fact, it's earth-shakingly important. The left is not under control. The left is not under control. Light brother, it's not. It is utterly out of control. It is hurting their prospects every day. All of this violence and so on, and they know it. They are absolutely out of control. They're cornered by their own philosophy. They are just trapped in their belief system that leads inevitably to this kind of thing, which is why the mayor of Seattle is complaining about protesters on a yard. What's the matter with them? We thought that they were doing our work and making life bad for Donald Trump. What are they doing on my property, protesting me? I'm on their side. Nope, out of control. They have sown the whirlwind. But the big news is this, folks. This is gigantic news. Star Wars was destroyed by left-wing values. They knew that Star Wars was powerful. They wanted it destroyed, and they also wanted to use Star Wars to inject left-wing values into the pop culture because they knew that nobody wanted to take it intellectually, that nobody wanted to vote for it or anything. And so they destroyed Star Wars. And I always wondered, I said, wow, I guess that ideology trumps even money. But it's some indication that's not the case. There apparently was a meeting of Lucasfilm and Disney, and Kathleen Kennedy, who's responsible for destroying Star Wars, was not invited. There are rumors, apparently some well-rounded rumors, that they are going to retcon, they're going to retroactively continuity, they're going to make The Last Jedi go away. They're just going to redo it. They're going to say it was a vision. This whole thing with Luke, being a kind of bitter old hermit, that was a potential Luke in an alternate timeline. I think they're going to bring in, as Dave Wellman points out, I think they're going to bring Jon Favreau in to save it, and it's a multi-billion-dollar franchise that has been absolutely destroyed by these SJWs, and I thought that's where it's at. But now apparently Disney wants. Disney's basically tore down Tomorrowland to make Star Wars Galaxy Edge. And I thought, my God, if I ever go to Disneyland, it could be a 9-hour wait to get into that thing. Nobody's going. They absolutely did it. So rumor is out there now that they understand that they have damaged the brand so fundamentally that somebody finally explained to executives what canon means to fans. That Bob Iger, I think somebody finally sat down and explained to Bob Iger, no, it's not that you can just make a good movie now. You have to undo the thing that undid all the previous stuff. And I think somebody got it to him. I think they're going to basically say that Last Jedi and probably Rise of Skywalker just never happened, that it's essentially fan fiction. I love this. Ted Yantis says it's basically the Bob Newhart show all over again. I don't know if you remember that, but there were, I can't remember which was which. I think the first one was called Newhart, and the second was the Bob Newhart show. So the first show was the one with Suzanne Pleshette as his wife, and he's a psychiatrist. And the second one was the one where he's running like a bed and breakfast, small hotel. And the ending of the small hotel one was he wakes up in bed with Suzanne Pleshette and says, you won't believe the dream I just had. I was a hotel manager in New England or something. And then the end of da 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 da. It's like put the original music on. It was brilliant, really, really clever, really clever. But basically, there's that. And Yasha beat me to the point here, but they're doing the same thing with Doctor Who. The people that have turned Doctor Who into this left-wing thing are gone, and the female doctor is gone. And they're going to try and rebuild that franchise. And there's pretty compelling evidence that Star Trek has basically said to Discovery, which I think is an abomination to top all abominations. They basically sent Star Trek Discovery with their little, with their Broadway outfits, their silver and gold outfits, and the ship that spins around and is powered by the spore drive, they basically said, "Oh, look, Discovery's gone into a wormhole. It's disappeared from the universe. Good luck, Discovery. We were so down with you, and you're gone, and we'll never see you again." And you know what they replaced? What they replaced this black chick who was Spock's half brother with? They replaced him with a white male, and he looks plenty alpha to me. And number one is the exact same character that was in The Cage, and they're going to be doing the series with Christopher Pike prior to Captain Kirk, and the Enterprise is back, and the Enterprise looks like the Enterprise, and the uniforms that they're wearing look like the uniforms, and the bridge of the Enterprise, this is post-Discovery, this is just last year, is essentially an updated version of the exact bridge in the original Star Trek episode, to the degree that one of the people from the Discovery universe said, "Oh, you decided to go with orange railings. Yeah, that's the color they're supposed to be." And so it looks like they are trying to recover Star Trek by going back to being Star Trek. I mean, right back. And they're also smart enough to not have tried to recreate Kirk and Spock and McCoy again, because the whole Kelvin timeline was just horrible. It's just terrible. It was just terrible, 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 horrible. And so J.J. Abrams runs runs Star Trek off of the rails. He said, "I want to do everything my way, and I don't want to have to go to all the trouble to learn the lore and learn all the background that made people fans of it in the first place. I don't want to go to that trouble. So I know we'll just have a different timeline. We're not even going to say it's a different timeline. I'm just going to start telling completely different stories from scratch and let the fans figure it out." So the Abrams films, the 3 Star Trek movies, became the Abrams timeline, which was called the Kelvin timeline because that was the name of the first ship in the first movie. But it's not. It's canon because it's official, but it's not really Star Wars and Star Trek, and it destroyed Star Trek, and so did Discovery. And now the people that own these properties are finally saying, "Oh, so all of these multi-billion-dollar properties that we put billions of dollars into purchasing, now all of a sudden aren't selling anything. Nobody's watching the shows. Nobody's buying the toys. Nobody's doing anything. We spent billions and billions of dollars on this weird nerd thing that was making billions of dollars because we saw the books. And we turned it over to you, and you told us that all they really need are modern progressive values. And it turns out you put those progressive values into these things, and now they're useless. They're worthless." Yeah, basically. Well, we want our billions of dollars back. We don't know jack about show business, and we don't understand fandom. We don't understand any of it. All we know is that these things were making billions of dollars when we bought them, and now they're not. So what happened? And then this might be what's happening to Star Citizen too. They're just people with money. Investors put like $40 million into Star Citizen, and we haven't seen Chris Roberts in 6 months. And I suspect that when somebody who knows how to handle money, like a capitalist investor, when he makes an investment, he wants his money back. And it's one thing for Chris Roberts to spend 10 years and $300 million and do less and less and less every single day. But people who put $50 million into that are now probably saying, no. You are just going to have to step aside, and we're going to put people in here who are not going to create your vision. They're just going to release this game, or they're going to get it to a place where it's making money, and we'll get our money back. I think it's what's happened with Star Wars and Star Trek, and Doctor Who has bailed on that whole thing. All of it. I think we'll look back on the decade of from 2010 to 2020. We'll look on this. Last of Us 2, great example. I don't know why I didn't think of that earlier. Last of Us 2 we haven't talked about that since last time. A hugely popular video game. They came out with a long awaited part 2. Rumors were that it was going to be very PC. Sure enough, it was. Ellie, who is this young girl who's being defended by this guy Joel throughout the whole first episode, the whole first game that everybody loves so much, the relationship between them, father-daughter relationship, and it's just great. Now, all of a sudden, she's gay, by the way. Critical Drinker basically said, no, it's a brilliant video game. It looks great. It's brave. It's just a terrible, horrible, horrible thing. So this guy Joel, who they feature in all of the teaser trailers, the guy who was basically the guy who was the protector and the main protagonist through the original one, he gets beaten to death with a golf club. Get it? A golf club by a really massively built woman who looks like a lesbian but isn't actually. But don't worry, because the one who the little girl is in fact a lesbian, and she's having a relationship with this other kind of ditzy girl who's kind of half gay and half not gay, and nobody gives a damn about any of these people except for the fact that all of these kids that grew up and young adults who grew up thinking that Joel would be there to save them. I don't think they actually believe that, but in their subconscious, he was their father. He was their father figure. He gets beaten to death for nothing, absolutely for nothing, just so that they could subvert your expectations. And they are absolutely furious. And I've seen 20 videos by lifelong gamers who just basically said, as far as I'm concerned, this second one just didn't happen. I'm just gonna close my eyes. I'm gonna do this whole thing we talked about earlier with doublethink. I'm just gonna close my eyes and say that The Last of Us ended with The Last of Us Part 1. It was a great ending, and that's where it went. And I'm just gonna tell myself that this thing didn't happen. So retcon is to go back and change things in the beginning, retroactive continuity. It's when you undo things that had already happened earlier. And the left loves it because deconstructionism is retcon is deconstructionism. Retcon is another word for deconstructionism, and deconstructionism is to say that you know more about what Shakespeare was writing than Shakespeare did. Shakespeare wrote Romeo and Juliet, but Shakespeare had no idea what the actual themes of Romeo and Juliet are, and I do, because I'm a professor at Cal State Northridge, and I'm obviously better judge of drama than William Shakespeare is. So let me tell you what Shakespeare really meant by Romeo and Juliet. That is deconstruction, and that is also retcon. It's all these liberals going back to conservative ideas. They're not openly conservative, but as I said before, all entertainment is conservative. You got a young guy, gets into a fighter jet by himself and destroys this all-powerful state, saves the girl with a gun. That's conservatism, and that's got to go. So Luke Skywalker had to be retroactively destroyed. And now the people with the money are retroactively destroying the retroactive destruction of all of these franchises. They're trying to use the same technique that the left used to destroy them. When I say destroy them, I don't just mean destroy them in the present. To undo Luke Skywalker, to undo Captain Kirk. There's rumors that Kirk is going to be bisexual if they bring something like this back. I heard somebody texted me this. I said there's rumors that if they do another Star Trek reboot, that they're going to make Kirk bisexual. I said, well, then he can be called Captain Kirk, and he can wear a yellow shirt and everything, but it's not him, because Captain Kirk isn't gay, and James Bond is not a black woman, and that's just too bad. The left wants you to think that you can be forced to believe this, but that's because, and I'm going to wrap with this, but this will hold us for another 15, 20 minutes easy. The left cannot create characters that people want. They cannot. Feminists cannot write. They cannot. They don't know how to do it. In order to write a character, male or female, you have to put them through hardships, and you have to let them fail, and you have to let them make bad decisions. And it is a very, very fundamental error that writers make, and I've made this for decades, that I like these characters, these are my characters, so I don't want anything bad to happen to them, and therefore I just want them to be right all the time because I'm living my life through them. Well, that's boring. That's what a Mary Sue is. A Mary Sue, male or female, is a character written by the writer to represent that everything the writer wants to be, and so therefore they have unlimited powers. They're never wrong. They're always in the right place at the right time. They never fail. because the writer is living the vicarious life of this Mary Sue character. And they love it. They're so closely bonded to it that they don't want to put them through hardship or have them do awful things, because they feel like that would be a contradiction to what they're trying to show you. This is the person who I think you should be. And so feminists can't write because of two reasons. First of all, entertainment is action, and action is, generally speaking, male. Not always, but generally. And you can have strong female characters and have it work, and Ripley is a perfect example of that, and so is Sarah Connor. You can have it, but you can't take men out of it so that it's nothing but women being perfect all the time, because that's what they did with Star Wars, that's what they did with Star Trek with this Michael character, and it's what they did with Picard and all the rest of it. They can't do it. And when I say that these woke writers can't do it, what I mean to say is they are not capable of it. They do not have the talent. They do not have the talent to write compelling characters, and their ideology prevents them from writing compelling characters. So they're doubly cursed. And that's why all of this stuff sucks. That's why all the Star Wars sequels suck, and why Discovery sucked, and Picard sucked, and Doctor Who sucked, and Ghostbusters 2016 sucked, and this new James Bond movie is going to suck, and all of it. They all suck because what these people are thinking they can do is that they can take feminist values and woke values and just simply paste them on top of characters that were neither of those things, which is why they were interesting, which is why people cared about them. What is the difference between Star Wars and Ice Pirates? What's the difference? They're both space movies. They're both space operas. What's the difference between Star Wars and Ice Pirates? As far as these people are concerned, there is no difference. It's just, it's a space thing that people like. But there was something to Star Wars that was different and better than Ice Pirates. It appealed to people on a different level. What's the difference between Star Trek and Lost in Space? I loved Lost in Space, but I loved Lost in Space because I was a child. Lost in Space started out, first season was fairly interesting sci-fi, and then it just became a parody of it. It was Batman. It was a children's show. So what's the difference? One of them is immortal, the other one isn't. Ice Pirates is utterly forgotten. Why? Because Ice Pirates didn't have the lightning in the bottle that Star Wars did. They didn't capture it because they weren't on that built-in journey of the hero story that's wired into men and women both. And these idiots, these woke idiots, think that they can take... This is what they're trying to do. It's very similar to Stolen Valor. What we've seen with the pop culture is the same dynamic as Stolen Valor. It is people trying to put on the uniform and get all of the benefits of the work that was done by other people and that they are not willing to do, that they had nothing to do with it, who in fact they oppose. So when you have a coward, a physical coward, getting dressed up in a Marine Corps uniform so that he can be bask in the adulation of people who respect what real Marines do, it's stolen valor. And this is what the left has done with all of these things. They've stolen the capital, the emotional capital that the original series of Star Trek and the original Star Wars and the original Doctor Who's and all of it. All these things built up a cachet. They caught that lightning in the bottle, and that's why Star Wars is different than Ice Pirates. But you can't take that and then simply turn it in the exact opposite direction, especially if you don't have any talent. You didn't build that. You got it exactly right. Dave, that's how they look at it. That's how they look at it. It's like Star Trek, Captain Kirk. I don't even understand the whole spaceship thing, whatever. But look, okay, so he's popular. So we know people are going to watch it. So let's make him gay because we think people need to understand that that's how they should feel about things. Let's make him gay. Okay. Let's make, in The Last of Us, let's make Ellie gay. Okay, look, it's a tough world. I don't have a particular problem with that so much, but Let's have somebody murder the person who you are absolutely been bonded to in the entire first game. Let's have this enormously muscular woman beat in the brains of a guy who you spent 25 hours or 30 or 50 or 70 or 100 hours playing and loving. Let's have this person beat his skull in with a golf club. And then let's have you play the person who just killed Joel. And we will walk you through an adventure with you now playing the person who just murdered the person who you like the most. Now you're playing the murderer. And we're going to give you all of these little cutscenes to show you, ooh, it's more complicated than we thought. Maybe I didn't realize that she was abused, or, oh, I didn't realize this, or, oh my God, look at that. And they give you all of this stuff to force down your throat. There's a different perspective to things, and you should look at both sides of the equation. And who are you to say that one person is right and one person is wrong? We're going to make you play the murderer of the person you loved. And you're going to play that person, and we're going to continue to put stuff in front of you until you realize that she is no different than anybody else, that she and Joel are morally equivalent, and that you should not look. They beat Joel's skull in with a golf club because in The Last of Us Part 1, Joel is everything that they hate and must be destroyed. He is a strong, good male, and that has to go. So if you have to beat his skull in by this heavyset woman, heavyset's not the word, this crazy muscular woman, this bodybuilder woman, she beating Joel it's not like super deep kind of irony that you have to decode here. This is women beating to death strong, powerful males in front of you so that you understand that strong, powerful males are bad. And in addition, why don't we get a character in the game who looks exactly like the director and have him spit on Joel's dead body? Pfft, that's for you, pendejo. Okay, so heroism, pfft, that's for you, pendejo. Heterosexuality, pfft, that's for you, pendejo. Honesty, integrity, character, doing the right thing, pfft, that's for you, pendejo. Things are much more complicated than you realize, Joel. You think that the world was just good and evil, but you don't realize that, there is no good and evil. The person who just murdered you, we're going to give 50 reasons why you should like the person who just murdered you. But you know what happens? It doesn't work. PewDiePie really nailed it. He saw this character butcher Joel, and he's shocked, as everybody else who saw it was shocked. And then when he realizes, oh, now they want me to play the murderer, now I get to be the person who just murdered Joel? Okay, so I control this person's body now? Yep. And what PewDiePie said was, where's a tall building that I can jump off of? Maybe if I bang my head into this rock, I can kill myself. And he just basically spent 10 or 15 minutes trying to kill the person who killed Joel because he loves Joel, like everybody else did. And he's not buying this. He's completely out of the game. In fact, he's not only out of the game, he is now opposed to the game. Oh, you're going to make me play this person's murderer? Let me see how many ways I can kill the character that I'm supposed to play, because I want to see this person die for what they did. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. And all across the culture now, we're seeing signs that the money is talking. That's the only explanation for it, is that the money people have said, we put billions of dollars into this and put you in charge of it. You told us this is what people wanted. Now we realize, no, it's not what people wanted. It's what you wanted for your personal agendas. So back up. You're done. Yeah, but unfortunately, they're fired. Well, Bob, the problem is, even if you fire Kathleen Kennedy, we're going to get somebody come in and we're going to make a good Star Wars movie. Bob, it's not going to do it. What do you mean it's not going to do it? No, she's undone it. She's destroyed it. She's gone back and dissolved it. It doesn't exist anymore. We just make a good one. No, they're gone, Bob. They're not coming back. She has undone it. And they are not just angry, they are now trapped. They have seen the person who they loved in Luke Skywalker or Joel or whatever turned into living crap. And now they've just plain gone, and they're not coming back, and we're not getting anybody new no matter what they told you. Well, how the hell do we get out of this mess? We got billions of dollars in this. How the hell do we get out of it? only thing I can think of is to say that, the movie that destroyed Luke Skywalker, we could remake it. What's that now? It's all imaginary. These are fictional characters, and the fans love them, and the fans only get to see them in products that we make. So if we make a product that turns a guy who we loved into somebody who we hate, then the only way to back that up is for us to go and do that again, except undo the undoing. I'm not entirely sure I get this. Bob, the only way you're going to get your billions of dollars back is if you do everything in your power and money to say that these woke destruction of Star Wars were not real. What? No, they're not real. They didn't happen. Of course they happened. We spent hundreds of millions of dollars. We lost hundreds of millions of dollars on these movies. Of course they happened. No. Just tell them that they didn't. And that's all they need. That's all you need, is just give them a way to say, okay, didn't happen. Luke isn't really a coward and a murderer, and he didn't really give up. Some version of Luke in some alternate timeline may have done that. And Palpatine may have forced us to look at that alternate timeline. But that's just one weird, fluky version of Luke. There's millions of versions of Luke, and in virtually all of them, he's the hero we remember him being. So what we'll do is we'll say that the whole thing was an illusion that the Emperor basically put out there. And he was killed in the Death Star, by the way, because nobody survives the destruction of something like this. It's ridiculous. So what do we have to do? Well, we have to go back, make a movie that not only shows Luke Skywalker as the person that we remembered him as, but that also says that all of that stomach-churning stuff that you saw was an illusion. Not that it didn't happen. It was an illusion. It was what might have been. Perfect. It was a dream sequence. This is what they're doing. I don't know why I didn't see this earlier. This is exactly what they're doing. They're basically, what they're going to try to do to save Star Wars is they're going to have Bob Newhart wake up in bed with Suzanne Plachette and say, my God, I just had this terrible dream. You won't believe what I dreamed. What? I was a hotel manager. You hate hotels. I know. I was in New England. You hate New England. I know. And there were these nutty guys. Bob, you're a psychologist. I know. What a weird dream. That's how they're going to do it. And that will let them out. That will give fandom a way out. Now, if they do that, and then they bring in somebody who really does understand Star Wars and who has actual genuine talent, and that's Jon Favreau as an example. His name has been mentioned. I think he's the perfect choice, but nevertheless, let's just use him anyway, because I'm virtually positive it'll be him. Jon Favreau is a brilliantly talented guy. I don't know what his politics are. I'm sure he's a left-winger, but I know that Favreau is a brilliant guy because I saw Swingers, and that was a grand movie. And I saw Iron Man, and whether or not Favreau believes that Iron Man should be patriotic, he understands that he has to be for the fans. So, Jon Favreau is going to come back, and he's going to make Star Wars what it was. And he better move fast before something happens to Han Solo, to Harrison Ford, or to Mark Hamill. They're all getting a little long in the tooth. As many commenters have pointed out, the opportunity to see Leia, Luke, and Han together on the same stage at the same time is gone. Carrie Fisher's been dead for a couple years now, so that's it. And Harrison Ford says he wants nothing to do with Star Wars ever again, and he doesn't. But Jon Favreau with Bob Iger's checkbook can keep adding zeros to the amount until there is literally an offer that he simply can't say no to. Harrison Ford doesn't need the money, but there comes a point when the amount of money that could be put on the table is virtually irresistible. I know for a certain fact that Mark Hamill would probably work for free or even pay them if he had a chance to redeem his character because he hated what happened to him so much. So, yeah. So the point is, back to the real world. The left realizes, whether they know it or not, The left realizes that they have failed, that they thought that they could take things that were popular because they were conservative, turn them into progressives, and have them still be popular. But people would rather walk away from Star Wars than live with SJW Star Wars. And so they failed. They cannot get people to buy what they're selling. They can't. Even when they try their very best. When they make Mike Stivic the hero and Archie Bunker the bigot, people go with Archie Bunker because he's got a heart, and Mike Stivic is a mooch and a leech, and he sleeps till 4 in the afternoon, and Archie Bunker gets up at 5 a.m., and Archie Bunker buys every single meal that Mike Stivic gets, and Mike Stivic does nothing but give Archie Bunker a hard time while he lives on his food and sleeps under his roof. And that they can't get away from because that's how they are. They make Denny Crane into this pistol-packing lunatic. Turns out he's the only man in the entire show, so he becomes the hero. Same thing for Alec Baldwin's character on 30 Rock. Same thing for Ron Swanson. They make Ron Swanson into a cartoon conservative, and he is by far, the most well-loved character on that show, and one of the most well-loved characters in television. And every time the guy that plays him opens his mouth, I say, please shut up. I'm just going to turn off the channel because I love Ron Swanson so much. And every time they tried to push him further, every time they tried to make Ron Swanson more and more ridiculously conservative, people liked him even better. Al Bundy, same thing. Yeah, Last Man Standing too. Mal Reynolds in Firefly. But I think I like Ron Swanson the best because he's just so bloody well written. These people, now those people, unlike the SJWs, those people have actual talent. Those comedy writers for all of these shows were really talented. The things they did with Ron Swanson just impressed me. And I'm speaking as a guy who wrote some TV comedies. None of them produced, but I wrote them for the people. The producers of the shows asked me to write them. So the Ron Swanson thing is, there's just so many examples. The one I keep using all the time is just, he's starving and he goes and he hasn't eaten. He's huge episodic because he lives on raw steak and whiskey basically, and he goes to what's essentially a Denny's in the middle of the night, and he asks for a steak, and they bring out a Denny's steak. It's a thin little strip of leather, and he says, "What is this?" And the waiter says, "It's a steak." He says, "This isn't a steak. How can you call this a steak? What kind of a place is this? You know what? I've changed my mind. Here's what I want. Bring me all of the bacon and the eggs that you have." And the kid nods and he starts turning away, and Ron says, No, wait. I'm worried that what you heard me say was bring me lots of bacon and eggs. But what I said was bring me all of the bacon and eggs that you have. And the kid nods his head. And all you need to know about, just look up Ron Swanson's greatest hits on YouTube. It's one masterpiece after another. One after another. And they made him weak in certain areas, which made him even more believable. He's this tough guy. He's got a bitch of an ex-wife, and he knows that she owns him. And sure enough, she comes back and owns him and makes him get cornrows and all the rest of it. And he's got a pre-recorded tape that he recorded in advance. He's saying, if you're watching this means you're back together with that witch and you've completely lost yourself again. So here's what you have to do to get out of it. Just binge watch Ron Swanson on YouTube. It's just brilliant. But this is their problem, and this is why we're seeing all the violence in the street, because they know that this is their last chance. This is it. And I think every day they go out there and riot and pull down another statue, they lose 200,000 more votes. And we'll see. We'll see how Democrats like being called white supremacists by their own party, because they think that going to a 4th of July parade is a good deal. But the more important point is that these woke writers cannot write things. That the guy who wrote that ending to Joel, Could argue, well, that's how the real world is, and it's a violent world. Absolutely. But it was when I first saw this when the Last of Us 2 came out, and I'd heard what had happened. The first thing I saw, and I saw it in 5 or 6 different places, was Joel deserved a better death than that. And that's exactly right. There is a when you willingly suspend your disbelief and give your 3 hours and $20 to somebody to entertain you, they're not required to give you the story you want, because the story you want is the Mary Sue story. You don't want to see your characters that you love doing bad things and making mistakes. You want them to win. In fact, just as a little sidelight, I had a great conversation with our theater professor, and this would be back in 1981, 82. Might have been on my second trip back there, so mid-90s. Must have been, yeah. And he was the guy who taught me a fair amount about writing, and we were sitting there after hours, as we always did every night except for Sunday, at the Windjammer in Gainesville, Florida, just drinking beer and eating Windjammer specials. And he was saying, this whole thing, because computer games were just getting really started, and they had done some experimental movies where the audience gets to vote on what happens next. You come to this plot point, and then the audience votes on what happens next. And he was saying, I don't know if there's going to be any actors anymore. I think digital people will probably take over actors. And even at the time, I said, that's possible. I said, but there's not going to be any place for writers anymore. People are just going to write the story. They're going to pick the story as they go along. I said, now, David, that's where you're wrong. That's where you're wrong. Because if you let an audience decide what happens in real time, and they've done this, there have been movies that did this. But if you have a movie where the audience constantly gets a chance to vote on what the guy should do next, it will be the worst version of the movie, because everybody will want the hero to do the right thing, and nothing bad will ever happen to him, and he will not be lovable because he won't have to overcome anything. Writers will be here forever. Storytellers will be here forever. Yeah, I personally put my faith in Blast Hard Cheese. That's what I think is going to happen. They can't win, and nobody wants to buy their stuff. And whether or not they're going to win this election because of this virus, I don't know. I don't think they will. I think if Trump is reelected, they're going to riot. They're just going to burn things down. And that's when it's time for these children who've never, ever, ever been stopped by anybody ever, anywhere, are finally going to come into contact with the reality comment. The way you stop Antifa, you don't have to shoot Antifa. I don't want them shooting Antifa. I don't want Americans shot, even miserable low-life swine like that. I don't want to see that in this country. The way you stop Antifa is you wait till the next time that they are on the scene and destroying things, and then you arrest 20 of them, and you give them all 10 years in federal prison. You don't have to give the whole group there. You won't just arrest 20 and give them 10 years in federal penitentiary. And when they do it again, arrest another 10 or 20 and give them 10 years in the federal penitentiary system. And this will end very, very quickly. Why wouldn't they riot? What have they got to lose? What's going to happen to them? Nothing. Nothing's going to happen to them. They know it. They can break into windows. They can steal stuff from stores. They can make demands. And all they'll do is get their way. The more temper tantrums they have, the more they've gotten their way. And the only way to stop that is to do that. Now, you say, is that fair to the other members of Antifa? Nope, it's not. It'd be nice to give them all 10 years, but you don't have to. It's that line, pour le conjure les autres, to encourage the others. We're gonna take these 4 or 5 mutineers and we're gonna tie them to the front of a cannon, and then we're gonna fire the cannon. Why are we doing this? Well, to encourage the others. There you go. They can't win, and they know it. And now they're playing, as I said, they're playing without a goal. Somebody said in comments they're playing the 2-minute drill. They're down by 21 points, and they've got 3.5 minutes on the clock. Now they have to do everything. They have to throw the bomb and they have to win that. Then they have to do the onside kick and they have to recover that. Then they have to score again and they have to do the onside. All of this stuff. They are in they are in desperate straits, and they're also emotional children. So we will see. We will see. Let's see. Oh, this is great. Will K. I watched your thing on gliders and decided to go for it. Been a student, single engine, if you. I've forgotten what that means. For years and haven't been able to finish due to cost. Getting my glider's license would be quick and cheap, and it would be a great way for me to get plenty of cheap PIC pilot and command time without having to pay for gas. I look forward to sailing over those Sierra Nevada waves. Will, it will give you the best feeling ever. When you realize that you can stay up in the sky without an engine, if you just pay attention, you'll feel it all over again. And once you start flying a glider, you will be aware of things that you were never, ever, ever aware of in an airplane. And once you do it, you will never forget it. And you're in a glider, there's, there have been many, 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 many times that glider pilots have gotten out of the cockpit of their little plastic birds and couldn't find the cushion they were sitting on, because there are moments up there that are pretty high pucker factor, and it keeps you on your toes, really pushes you to the absolute limits of it. And so, since you know that you are going to have to land this glider back on your field, that would be the hopeful choice anyway. You will suddenly be aware of where you are over the ground. You'll be acutely aware of what the wind is doing. Are you upwind? Are you downwind? Oh my God, am I so far downwind now that I can't get back? If I am so far downwind, what do? You dive. Oh, that doesn't make any sense. I got to get back there. I want to stay as high as possible, as long as possible. No, you don't. You're being blown away from your course. Your only chance is to dive that aircraft, pick up as much speed as you can, and then use that speed to beat the headwind and get to the field boundary. This business about slowing down so that you can stay as long in the sky is just making every second worse. You gotta do the exact counterintuitive thing. You gotta dive, get this plane going as fast as it'll go, because that's the only way you're going to beat this headwind thing. That's a small example, counterintuitive example, but you will never forget it. And then if you ever, it likely will never happen. It almost never happens for anybody. Comes a time up there when all of a sudden engines start to run a little rough or goes completely quiet. You're going to have a moment of, oh my God, that's it, we're done. And that's going to last about 1/10 of a second. And you just feel this big old lever in the back of your head just go chunk. And then you will say, oh, okay, so I'm in a glider again, right? What's the glide ratio on this thing? On a Cessna 172, I want to say it's about 7-1. Maybe a little bit higher, but I don't think it's much higher. Okay, so I'm going to have to do everything I did at 30-1, but I'm just going to have to do it in a much smaller space. But then, because honestly, Will, if you ever do have an engine failure, and you're going to realize that planes can fly without engines, and you're going to know that because you'll have spent hours and hours doing it. When I had first of my 3 engine failures, I just felt that lever kick in, because I just said, oh my God, I'm in the sky and I don't have an engine anymore. We're going down. And then you say, well, hang on now. I've been in airplanes that didn't have engines before, and I've flown them for 8 hours without coming down. Now, this plane's not going to fly for 8 hours, but it doesn't just fall out of the sky when the engine stops. It does for a lot of pilots, but that's because they're just too scared to understand that as long as you continue to fly the airplane, you've got an airplane. If you are so determined to keep the thing in the sky that you stall the wing, now you're on an anvil. And and that's just priceless. I don't believe in coercion of any kind, really don't. But if it were up to me, I would make it extraordinarily highly recommended that anybody who learns how to fly starts in sailplanes. Anybody. You will have. I've been down this road 5 or 10 times before, but not recently. You will know the difference between pitch and power. You will think that if you start flying in powered airplanes, you're going to think when you want to climb, you just pull back on the control yoke. That's how you climb. No, that's how you slow down. If you want to climb, you add power. That doesn't seem to make sense, but it's true. And you will know this in a glider because you don't have any power. So all of this stuff will be crystal clear. Your airspeed will be determined by your pitch angle, and there's no engine in there that you can add power to or not power to confuse you. It's just going to be your pitch is controlling your airspeed. You're never going to forget that. Somebody in the comment sections asked me why I don't get invited to be on the Crowder Show. I've never been asked. I think I might have been asked once. I said, love to do it. Never got a follow-up call. We worked together at PJTV for a little over a year. Crowder and I went to Guantanamo Bay together. I've been fishing in Guantanamo Bay with Steve Crowder at 2 in the morning in Fidel Castro's Bay. Yeah, I should call him back. I don't have any contact information. If anybody does know how to reach him, I'm sure there's a general contact information. If anybody has an inside line on that, you want to send it to info@billwhittle.com. I'll send him an email. Same goes for Glenn Beck, who I've dealt with several times and enjoyed being with enormously. I don't have their contact info, which I should get. But anyway, I'd love to do the shows. I'd love to do all of them. And I did, last time I was on Glenn Beck was for the Cold War, the beginning of the Cold War, I think. Had a great time. And Glenn Beck and I had more fun than I've ever had with anybody when he came on. I introduced him to an organization that may or may not exist, and that was just the most fun I've ever had. Undoubtedly the most fun he ever had. So anyway, let me see here. I want to get to 3 hours. It's just a milestone now. Daryl Green's got a question, which is really what I've just been talking about for the last couple hours, but it's like, it's worth it to sum it up. As I watch people on the left just get more and more extreme, I can't help but question if there's a point where some of them will finally say, oh, come on, really? How many are being silent but starting to question, and how many are just mental? Well, it's like everything else, Daryl. It's and say hi to your brother Daryl for me too. It's a bell curve, right? And the bell curve is moving to the right. And I don't know how much or how far, but conservatives becoming more conservative, liberals becoming more conservative, and the middle's becoming more conservative. So anyway, let's see. This is a fair question. Eric Blake again. Hello, Bill. Let us reflect on your efforts in the culture war. Looking back at those efforts, what do you most regret having done, and what do you most regret not having done? This is taking me some time because I don't live a life full of regrets. I really don't spend a lot of time thinking about things like this. It's an honest question, though. I'm just trying to think if I can come up with an answer. The thing that I most regret having done was the Jeannie Ives promotion by a wide margin. When we were going to that event, I was with another conservative, and we were talking about an ad campaign, and just really running with it, really running with it, just really exciting ideas. And we'd been told that she was a rock rib conservative, and we got up there, and when she got the first email from one person who had cut and pasted stuff from Media Matters, she just completely folded, and left me out there to dry, and furthermore assured me that they wouldn't leave me out there to dry, and that was without a doubt the thing I regret the most. Really, 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 really regret doing that. And it's interesting too because not only did they accuse her of racism, Republicans did when she did something that the mob didn't like, but it also could have been a chance for her to really make a stand. You know, she could have made a stand at the beginning and said, "Look, I invited this guy because I don't think there's any hate in this guy, and I think he's being smeared, and they're smearing him, and they're going to smear me, and they're going to smear you." She could have gone that way, and she didn't. So, as far as the thing that I regret having not done, I'm really, I'm really, I'm assuming something that I didn't do in this line of work. There's a lot of things I still would like to do, obviously, but like opportunities that I missed. There must be thousands of them, Eric. Honest to God, there really must be thousands of them. But I can't think of one of them right now. I mean, I could have said something like, I certainly could have been in the Daily Wire family, considering that Daily Wire grew out of Declaration Entertainment, and Declaration Entertainment I put 3 or 4 years of my life into. But that would have been as an employee, and it's not a question of pride, although it may have been pride then. Johnny the Frost. I could have gone to Florida State. No, I don't think so. Thank you. That's funny. But you know, then it would have been. It's not that I didn't want to do a 9 to 5 job. It's nothing like that. I certainly would have gotten more exposure. It's just I can't put my finger on it exactly. But this whole thing for me has been kind of a passion-driven thing. You know, it's I do it because I care about it and I love it, and I don't know if I can. I certainly could manufacture that. We did the NRA shows for, I don't know, I did Grant Stinchfield show for a year, and I did the hot mic for 4 months, I guess. And I certainly could have kept doing that, but that's not my best work. That's just okay. It's showtime. What are we going to talk about for this half hour or this hour? It doesn't give me, neither of those would have really given me a chance to really just do what I like to do, which is just wander around and look at weird things. And what's the latest thing I just got completely fascinated on? Flew right out of my head. I get on these things, something like blows in front of me and go, that's kind of interesting. And once I realize that's really interesting, then I just dive down as deep as it goes. I just go right down to the bottom. So I just think I'm happy to say that honestly, truthfully, honestly, nothing is coming to mind in terms of things that I didn't do that I regret not doing. I have made a lot of mistakes in this life and continue to do that. But one of the things that I've always been proud of, and I've paid a price for too, obviously, but and that is every time I've seen an opportunity that was threatening or risky, I always did it. I always jumped. Um, and I do know for a certain fact that it is much, much worse to regret not doing something than it was to regret doing something. There is Dave Wellman said something, as long as you can still say the T in planetarium. It's funny you mentioned that. I had a dream about the planetarium last night. That's strange. It was like, I don't remember my dreams. My wife remembers every second of hers. But I was doing, like, I guess it was maybe the last, I think I was doing, I really would have liked to have done this actually. It would have been nice if I could have actually really done this. But I was doing the last show in the Space Transit Planetarium. They tore that down. They put in a new one closer to downtown Miami, which I haven't seen yet. And to my enormous relief, they took the star projector out of the original planetarium, the one I grew up with, and put it in, I think they put it in the lobby or something of the new planetarium. If that machine had been just left out in the rain, the way that that the paintings in the ambulatory were, or the way that the robot from Lost in Space was, or the chariot, or I don't know if you've ever seen those full-size sets from the second Star Wars movie, from Empire Strikes Back. They built a full-size Millennium Falcon, and then they just let it sit out in the rain and fall to pieces. Just unbearable. All of this stuff, the original Jupiter 2 model was just gone. They just restored it. So I'm glad I didn't have to see that happen. And I remember it was like the last, it's just a strange memory. As strange as you would bring it up. But yeah, I remember thinking, so this is going to be the last show in this building, and there'll be more shows going on and so on. But that was great. And I have to tell you, I remember, I mean, I haven't worked in the planetarium since 95, 96, something like that. So, what is that? Is that 25 years now? Something. But I would like to have done the last show there. I would like to have closed that place. And I often wonder what that last show was, and I'd be willing to bet you it was just another, it's like, okay, this is the last show on Sunday night, and that's it. Anyway, that's that. But I guess it's a nice thing to realize about yourself, that if somebody asks you what do you regret not doing, you really can't come up with anything on the spot. So anyway, yeah, I really can't think of anything. That's the honest truth. So at 8:58 p.m. And I'm going by. Oh, hey, look at that. Could be right. Yeah, we're over 3 hours live. So I'm gonna just. I never regret buying the Camaro. It was one of my favorite decisions ever. So at least for live broadcast, the recorded one on YouTube is going to be 2-3 minutes short. But at least we broke 3 hours on live, so that's good enough for me. I'm actually very hungry. I'm going to run out and grab a bite if I can. I'll pick up my wife a little later. She's out doing all kinds of interesting things. Thank you for the kind words, everybody. And remember, there is no I in business. I don't know why jokes like that just appeal to me so much, but they just make me laugh. Yeah, I will see all you guys hopefully next week. I expect to be here next week. I missed a couple weeks, may have been 3. I just really felt bad about it. Last week I just couldn't speak at all. Anyway, this show is made possible by those paying members at BillWhittle.com, and you know who you are, and I know who you are, and doesn't a day go by that I walk into this office and just think, my God, I can't believe people actually parted with their money to keep this little thing open and going. Do some good work, I think, and the reason I say that is because it just, what was the one we just did? It was a Bill Whittle now on, it was the one on Roberts and him choosing procedure over justice. And I don't know where this stuff comes from. I swear to God, I don't. I just sit down and I get a question and I just answer, and then I can't tell you how many times Scott will testify. This was probably we just finished show 442, I think, and on 50 or 60 of those, I've said out loud, I don't know where this comes from. It's so nice to have an understanding of the philosophy well enough so that no matter how hard this is and no matter how like damning the setup is or whatever, or how arcane it is, it's like, I don't know what to say about this. What do I believe? What do we all believe together? And it's like, okay, all right. And then next thing you know, well, there it is. It's gone. It's out. It's like, where'd that come from? Anyway, so that's that. Yep. I'm going to go grab some foodski. And you guys take care of yourself out there. And I will see you next week right here on the Stratosphere Lounge. And until then, y'all have a great time. Be careful out there. Have a great 4th of July. And we'll see you next week.